Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. We got a chat already in the comment section from Richard Rush. How you doing tonight, Richard? He says, do we take a wide receiver or a cornerback at 25? Well, we're going to be breaking down those wide receivers. So we're definitely going to be having conversations like those tonight. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money, and now sponsored by Callaway. Apparently we have producer, not producer anymore. That was just a Freudian slip there, but we got film room savant Kendall Mursky joining us. You can find him on Twitter at Mursky Kendall. Together we are the Bills guys. This is the Air Raid Hour presented by the Cover One Sports Network and Picasso's Pizza. Head on over to picassospizza.net. They got 4 great Western New York locations: Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. If you're out of their range locally, you can use things like DoorDash to get your food delivered. And if you're out of town, you're out of state, you're craving some Picasso's, those little tiny pepperoni cups, you can head on over to picassospizza.net, and they deliver countrywide frozen pizza. So head on over to picassospizza.net. They are the presenting sponsor of this show. And, gentlemen, it just seems like every single week we do a show, 3 or 4 days go by, and just crazy, nuts, absolutely bonkers news occurs. And this time, we're all just sitting there innocently living our lives, and you get a tweet from Adam Schefter on Tuesday morning saying, the Tyreek Hill and the Kansas City Chiefs contract talks have broken down, and he could be traded to the Jets or the Dolphins. 20 minutes later, traded to the Miami Dolphins.
That was yesterday.
Was it yesterday? Man, the
Yeah.
days are just blending together at this point. Yeah. But so just an absolutely wild couple of days as a conference opponent, a conference foe, a team that we have seen quite a bit of in the playoffs the last couple of years. The Kansas City Chiefs lose one of their best players, Tyreek Hill, but a division rival, the Miami Dolphins, gain Tyreek Hill. Dave, what are your thoughts about this entire situation here?
Well, first, as an aside, big congrats to MVS on getting that $30 million contract.
Seriously, right?
Former NC State guy before he transferred to, I think it was Central Florida, if I'm not mistaken, or South Florida. It was one of those two, but he was originally an NC State guy. Anyway, I digress. Tyreek to the Dolphins. Okay, so I saw a lot of Bills fans, to some extent, rightfully so, putting up the defense mechanism of, it's still Tua throwing him the ball, this and that. But you can't objectively look at the Dolphins and say that it doesn't help their chances, right? Like, they were borderline, playoff team last year. They came back from being 1-7, and they won 7 games in a row. Granted, it was a different coaching staff now, but they have Jalen Waddle. They have Mike Gesicki. They still have pretty good players on defense. And now they add Tyreek Hill to the mix. They went out and signed Chase Edmonds. The Dolphins are feeling like, hey, maybe we have a good enough team, maybe not necessarily to push for the division, but push for a playoff spot in this wild AFC. There are going to be a lot of good teams in the AFC that don't make the playoffs. And then the Dolphins probably figuring this whole conference is going to beat up on each other. We've got a chance. And they go out and they get Tyreek Hill. And as much as you want to say, okay, well, Tua can't throw the deep ball, how much should we get frustrated about watching Tyreek Hill and the Chiefs catch the ball 5-6 yards beyond the line of scrimmage and take it another 40-50? So to me, that is something that if you're the Dolphins and you look at Tyreek, that yards after catch, if you put him in a position to do that, the Chiefs did, and what they did with Jalen Waddle last year, you have a nice little combo there of guys. So I'm not going to sit here and say all of a sudden the Dolphins are AFC contenders, but I am going to tell you that it does make this harder for the Bills in the division. It may ultimately net out to making it, quote, easier for the Bills if they end up kind of coming face to face with the Chiefs again. But essentially what you've done is you've reallocated the wealth, right? You've redistributed the wealth in the AFC here. So while the Chiefs are still going to be very good, the Dolphins are now going to be better. So it's tough. I mean, you can't look at this, I think, if you're a Bills fan objectively and say the Dolphins aren't a little bit worrisome. You have to, right? They are a little worrisome depending on what happens with Tua this year.
Yeah, I mean, now it's a situation where, you think to yourself as a Bills fan, man, do we go from 6-0 and 5-1 in the division to maybe 4-2? Maybe we lose 2 games in the division this year. I'm just kidding, but I mean, they're a very good football team. I kind of feel bad for Brian Flores a little bit. If
Yeah.
the ownership would have helped him find a real offensive coordinator and gone out and spend some of the money, I think Miami probably could have had this success sooner, but all the pieces have fallen into place for the Miami Dolphins. They re-signed Emmanuel Agba. They got a very good secondary. They got a really good defense. They retained the defensive coordinator there. You got Teron Armstead, who has been added to that offensive line at left tackle. There's still some question marks throughout the rest of that offensive line. But a coach like Mike McDaniel is known for creating an offensive system that helps the quarterback, helps the offensive line a little bit. It looks like they're going to trade Devontae Parker, but Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, Myles Gaskin for now. I think Myles Gaskin could end up on the trade block as well.
Mostert too,
yeah. You got Cedric Wilson in the slot. You're going to have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on the outside. You're probably also going to have Preston Williams, Mike Gesicki. I do think Devontae Parker eventually gets traded. But Kendall, what do you think about what's going on down there in division rival Miami?
I mean, it's intriguing. You can't just like sit back and bat an eye at it like it's nothing, because it is something. You have to give them some respect now. And I mean, we talk about how much respect teams give Hill in coverage. You think about how much teams play off because they need to respect that deep ball. And even if it is to a quarterback, you have to respect that speed, because if he gets past you and he's 15 yards by you and 15 yards of cushion, it doesn't matter how inaccurate Tua is, because Hill has the speed to get under and track the ball. So I think they still have to prove it. You don't win seasons in the offseason, but it's still very impressive what they've done. I think the one caveat I truly have is more the coaching aspect to it, because obviously new coach, new system, all that stuff, it's all got to mesh and it's got to transition fluidly this year for it all to pan out how they're expecting it to. So there's a ton of talent, but there's no saying that it's gonna be everything that it is in year one. I think it has every bit of potential to be that, but they still have to prove it. They still have to get behind the coaching staff, the culture side of things, really trust what's going on inside the building. All of that stuff has to fall into place for the roster to reach its true potential. But that roster is legit. They are building a good contender in the AFC.
Your boy Lettuce comes in and says what the Chiefs had was the threat of Mahomes dodging the first pressure and hitting Hill deep. So we had to play the loose zone. If all Hill can do is quick slants, we can cover that. So yeah, I mean, the way you cover Tyreek Hill in the Miami Dolphins is going to be different from the way you scheme up and defend Tyreek Hill when he's got a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. But this is a guy in Mike McDaniel who, and I know they're different players stature wise and stuff, but this is a guy who got pretty creative along with Kyle Shanahan in scheming to get the ball into Deebo Samuel's hands. So Tyreek Hill could end up seeing the ball in different ways than he even saw in Kansas City. But your boy Lettuce comes in and says, draft McCreary and Punk out, and we never have to worry about the Dolphins defense. I still, Dave, you drafted Roger McCreary in your mock draft today. Head on over to Twitter, check out Dave's mock draft. I'm still team McCreary because I think he's just so fundamentally sound. He's my favorite corner in this draft outside of obviously my boy Kyler Gordon, but it'll be interesting to see how the Buffalo Bills, because we still got some soft spots on the depth chart. Cornerback being one of them. The other one being offensive line. And the Buffalo Bills went out today and they addressed their offensive line by signing Taiwan Jones. Just kidding. But for those of you keeping up at home, the Buffalo Bills did re-sign Taiwan Jones, special teamer, today. Shouldn't put much of a dent in our salary cap because he's probably going to be right around the 51st salary on the team. And I don't even think his roster spot is assured for those of you who are like anti-Taiwan Jones. To me, it looks like the Buffalo Bills let him test the market. Didn't really get a contract he likes. So he probably signed around somewhere like he did last year, $1.5 million, just to come back and be a special teams only player for the Buffalo Bills. But it'll be interesting to see if his roster spot is secure. But offensive line for the Buffalo Bills, we showed this depth chart on our last show. Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, Tommy Doyle. That's it at offensive tackle right now. Mitch Morse, Roger Saffold, Cody Ford, Greg Mans, Jacob Capra. That's it at offensive guard right now. And then you got the name Ryan Bates down there with an asterisk. 3 days ago when we did this show, He had visited with Minnesota. He had visited with New England. He had visited with Chicago. This morning, he signed a contract with the Chicago Bears. So the Buffalo Bills have 5 days to match a possible contract that Ryan Bates has signed with the Chicago Bears. The money has not been made public yet, what the contract was. The Buffalo Bills have been silent on it, but they do have until Tuesday of next week to match this contract if they so choose. My guess is over the next couple of days, you're going to start to see the contract numbers leak. It'll be interesting to see how long the Buffalo Bills let this play out. I have a feeling they're not going to match, and they're going to Friday news dump it around Friday afternoon to really depress our weekend. But Dave, do you have maybe a cheerier thought, or what are your thoughts on Ryan Bates signing this contract? Restricted free agent contract with the Chicago Bears.
Well, first, I mean, you have to do this if you're Ryan Bates, right? Because you're essentially trying to parlay what amounted to 5-6 good games at the end of the season, and really a lot of run from beat reporters, from content creators about how his insertion into the lineup really stabilized that offensive line the latter half of the season. So good for him to try to parlay as much of that as he can into a bigger contract. Eric Turner asked the question on Twitter today, like, where's your maximum for Ryan Bates as far as what you'd be comfortable with? He was like, is it $5 million a year, 6.5? I said, for me, realistically, it's between 3 and 4. That's kind of where I would feel comfortable. And here's the thing, like, the Bills are in a tough spot right now because they let Darrell Williams go for obvious reasons. They needed the cap space. Bates, they tendered maybe with the expectation that, or the gamble, as Greg Tomset put it, that this was a possible situation, but the history would say that when you tender these RFAs, they're more than likely coming back to your team. So they played a calculated risk there, and it may not work out for them, right? It may have been a misstep, but at least they got Saffold in, at least for the 1 year. And this is why in my mock draft today, I had the Bills taking Zion Johnson in the 25th pick, because I was kind of already writing Ryan Bates off as not returning to this team. So you're likely to go into training camp with Cody Ford and some combination of a draft pick or picks. And those couple guys you put on the depth chart there that you just showed a second ago as the competition for that spot. So in my mind, I've moved on. If it turns out the Bills can get him back for, let's say, $3-4 million a year, great. Probably have to restructure some things with other guys to make that happen. But we will really, truly see how much the Bills valued Ryan Bates and valued what he did at the end of last season in the next couple of days. Now, if the money's crazy, like $6-7 million a year, we're not going to. But if it's in around that $4-5 million range, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do.
The Bears have more money to play with than the Bills do. So they can front load a contract right now because they're not very good. They're in the process of rebuilding. They can front load a contract. We were having that conversation with Greg Tomset in the Cover One chat today. He's like, the best deal for Ryan Bates would be to go to Chicago and sign a 1 year deal, 1 year, $6 million, 1 year, $7 million, bet on himself, maybe have a better chance to start in Chicago, get his bag, play in Chicago, and have a chance to earn a second contract. But it seems to me like the Bills clearly don't value Ryan Bates the way the Bills fan base does. I mean, Ryan Bates took over Bills Mafia the second half of the final half of the season, or the final quarter of the season, with the way that he stepped into the lineup, and the offensive line just started to click and improve as Ryan Bates entered the lineup. But Aaron Cromer is a new offensive line coach from Bobby Johnson. You've seen the Buffalo Bills walk away from Darrell Williams. You've seen the Buffalo Bills walk away from John Feliciano. And now it appears like there is a possibility. And again, we can't have the most intelligent conversation until we know the money, right? Like, until we know what the money is, until we know what the contract is, we can't sit here and have more than just a projection conversation about it. But he's got a chance to walk away too. And I have a gut feeling the Buffalo Bills are not going to match this contract. And people are saying he's just a guy. I disagree. The man was a 10 RAS. I had been banging the table for him to start for 2 years since Ike Bodker stepped into the lineup. I wanted it to be Ryan Bates. I thought Bates, I said on the show, I wanted Bates and Bodker to compete for the spot that they just handed to John Feliciano when they re-signed him last offseason, when I thought that was a mistake. And by chance as Raz McPlayer, I don't disagree with you, but you have a really good athlete who then goes on the field for 4 games and plays really good football. So common sense would tell you, let's give this guy a chance. So I think it was a huge miscalculation by Brandon Beane. I don't give a shit if GMs don't typically chase these guys to pay the extra $1.5 million, even to give him a chance to come in and just compete for a job. Because even at the, $4 million, he'd still have been a quality depth piece on this football team. A guy who could play left guard, right guard, center, and in a pinch tackle. It was a huge miscalculation if we lose him by Brandon Beane. And there are people coming at me on Twitter today. Well, you think you're smarter than Brandon Beane? No, I don't think I'm smarter than Brandon Beane, but I can still disagree with something the dude does. And I think it was an absolute miscalculation on his part. But, I think Randy said it best in the comment section. The Buffalo Bills are going to bet on the traits. It wouldn't shock me if Cody Ford is our starting right guard week 1. Eric Turner was in the comment section of Cover Ones. He was kind of jokingly posting this, but he went in and he typed in, Cody Ford and looked up his players with comparable physical traits, and three former Aaron Kromer guys in Jordan Mills. What was it? Who were the other 2 guys?
Bobby Evans and Cam something.
Yeah. Someone else popped up, all 2 former Rams and Jordan Mills, guys that Aaron Kromer has coached, all popped up. So it, maybe in the Buffalo Bills and Aaron Kromer's eyes, they feel like they can rebuild Cody Ford. Obviously, we joked 2 months ago, maybe the Bills are going to let Cody Ford try again. And here they are. They're actually probably going to do it. So maybe we're overreacting, but until we figure out the actual status of Ryan Bates, until the draft comes and goes and that offensive line is set, we can actually see it after the draft. It's just, it's difficult.
Overreacting or not, your depth's been decimated one way or another, right? You don't have Bates, you don't have Darrell Williams. You're banking now on Cody Ford. And Saffold's here for 1 year and Feliciano's gone. So regardless of what you think of Bates, there was a good question in the comment section from Jason about okay, he played well at left guard. Do you think he could do the same at right guard? Well, he did have that position versatility. So you would like to think he could. And like you said, Steve, worst case scenario, if you pay him $3-4 million a year, maybe you still go out and draft Zion and all of a sudden at beyond 2022, Bates slides right back into left guard once Saffold's gone, and then you have Zion at right guard. You have options, but now you don't have that many options. So the Bills are kind of up against it right now with this situation.
It's just, it's, and I get it. The offseason is not over yet. There's still the 3rd wave of free agency. There's still the draft, etc. I understand that, but Brandon Beane went out and the first thing he said this offseason was our number 1 priority is protecting Josh Allen. And since the offseason started, he's signed Roger Saffold. He's quite possibly going to let Ryan Bates walk out the door. He's released John Feliciano. He's released Darrell Williams. And the only thing he's done is sign Greg Manns outside of Roger Saffold. We still need 10 offensive linemen just to get to training camp, right? A ton of bodies need to be added over the course of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th wave of free agency and of the draft, because just in terms of bodies, they need almost 10 guys that they need to add to this roster. They have 8 guys under contract, which is what they would go into the season with on a 53-man. So bodies will be added. This could obviously be an overreaction, but that's what we do as fans. We overreact to shit. I overreact to shit all the time. I was sitting there getting in shouting matches with people on Twitter today. The Buffalo Bills go out tomorrow and match Ryan Bates' contract and it'll all be for nothing. But that's just how I'm wired. And I think I hope people realize that by now. Kendall, what are your thoughts on the Ryan Bates thing?
I don't have a whole lot. I think you guys covered a ton of it, but I think a key point that you guys brought up is even if we did preemptively offer him 4 or 5 million or something to bring him back, maybe on a 2-3 year deal, a 2-year, 3rd year option type of deal, something like that. But the figure is 4 or 5 million. That's still less than what we signed John Feliciano to last year, and he ended up being a backup for us. So, I mean, in a value type of conversation, I can understand, maybe we don't want to get this guy and sign him to 4 or 5 million just to be a backup. We want him to be a starter, and they don't know that yet. So they didn't want to commit to that. And there's, the argument of maybe they wanted to see what his worth was because they honestly didn't know. And I think that's been a big part of it. I don't know how much the Bills knew how much value he had outside of Buffalo, because he's really only spent time in Philly and Buffalo, and he was in Philly for a short-lived moment. And then in his time in Buffalo, he's really only seen, jumbo set tight end roles, or, the 5-6 games that he had success in. So it's tough to gauge his value. And this may have been just a way for Brandon Beane to gauge that value. It may have been Aaron Cromer showing his hand that he doesn't want to keep a guy like that. So yeah, it's all speculation for right now.
And Charles G comes in and says, why are we all tripping over bodies? Who are the top 6 offensive linemen? That's who's protecting Josh. Like, we saw last year how injuries decimated the offensive line.
Yeah.
And I get that once you're a good football team, you can't be as deep as you probably want to be, or some other teams can be. I fully understand that. But I'm struggling with the logic of the lack of depth being on the offensive line. Like, because we saw last year what happened when the offensive line was decimated and how it threw the entire offense out of whack. And it's just like, I look at the draft and I'm like, I can see this 6th or 7th round wide receiver maybe contributing right away. I struggle to see that with like later round offensive linemen, at least until 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So I'm just tripping over the lack of depth at like what I think is just such an integral position group to your football team. And I completely understand you can't be deep everywhere, but that's where my struggles lie. And that's how I'm struggling to process this right now. But again, it can all change by the time, we get to St. John Fisher in July. All right. So the title of tonight's show is the wide receiver draft board. And that's what we're going to be doing this evening. We're going to be breaking down the wide receivers round by round in the NFL draft. We're going to start with round 1, work our way all the way through the board, all the way to the UDFAs. And at each round, we're going to talk about what players we like the most, and what players do we think are slotted correctly or projected correctly, what players might sneak into certain rounds or sneak out of certain rounds. And we want you guys to be a part of that conversation with us. So as we're working our way through the draft board tonight, if you think like, why isn't that guy in the round 1 board? Why isn't that guy in the round 2 board, etc., chime in the comments section. Let us know what you think. If you have a favorite in a certain round, a guy you think is a good fit, let us know as well, because that's obviously something we're going to be keeping our eye open for, is guys that we think are fits for the Buffalo Bills. So that should be super interesting. But before we get started today, ladies and gentlemen, I gotta start this thing because I think it fits into the show today with the Jabroni of the Week.
Jabroni, you are 3 seconds away. And The Rock means 3 seconds away from The Rock to lay a smackdown on your candy ass.
Yeah, I can't stop you though. You keep using this word jabroni, and it's awesome.
I'll tell you what, my jabroni involves NFL draft wide receivers, and my jabroni of the week is ESPN analyst Dan Orlovsky. Some of you might have seen this graphic that I put up on Twitter today. This tweet was remarkably incendiary and started to get my blood pressure arising when I read it. And I want to know what you guys think about this tweet here. This is Dan Orlovsky on Twitter this afternoon, mostly because I felt like he thought my blood pressure wasn't high enough already with the Ryan Bates stuff, and he wanted to really set me over the edge. So Dan Orlovsky tweeted, I don't think people understand how good the top 3 wide receivers in this class are. Drake London is Keyshawn Johnson. The 2 from Ohio State, Wilson plus Olave, are Julio Jones and a fast Keenan Allen. They are ridiculous. Holy hyperbole, Batman. This is, I think, some of the trouble we get into, and we're a little bit guilty of this because on this show, like, the last show we did with running backs, and we're going to do it again tonight, we try to find like physical comparables or play style comparables. I always try to temper my expectation with comparables, and I try not to look at like the highest end players. I try to find like average NFL players. Dan Orlovsky just went off the absolute deep end with these comparisons here, and I think it ties in with something that Eric Turner said in the Cover One chat a couple of days ago. He was like, man, I like Olave, I like Dodson, but I just see them as number 2s. I don't see them as like alpha number 1 wide receivers in the National Football League. I don't know if I would take a wide receiver that high. who I think is like a ceiling of a number 2. I disagree with that sentiment. I think you can take, in today's NFL, you can take a really good high-end number 2 wide receiver late in the first round, especially if you're a team like the Buffalo Bills, and it can put you over the top. But it really got me thinking, like, there are a lot of really good wide receivers in this class, but are there like chance to be upper echelon elite of the elite type of wide receivers in this draft class? I don't think so. Kendall, what do you think? Like, do you think that there's a chance for there to be like an absolute alpha top 5, top 10 receiver out of this draft class?
I think there's a chance. I don't think there's any reason to rule it out. I like the top 6 guys. I think all of those top 6 guys have a shot at being top 10. Not all of them, but I think each of them like has a chance, and one of them will rise to the top. But I mean, yeah, the way that tweet was worded, and the comps are dangerous, man. But like, comping anyone to Julio is just a dangerous thing to do. And doing it with the players like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave just doesn't make sense to me. It just, the comp for it, like, you have 2 physical or 2 like fast, like nuanced route running receivers, and then you comp them to a really fast but physical, like physically dominant receiver. It just doesn't make sense from a play style comparison perspective. But I agree with you to an extent that this top end isn't really sexy like it has been in the past, but I wouldn't discount it to the point where you're thinking that none of these guys are going to, be a Justin Jefferson in a few years or something like that. They may not have Justin Jefferson rookie years or anything like that, but I think all of these guys have a chance to raise to the caliber of a Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, those kind of recent rookies. T. Higgins isn't a top 10 wide receiver in the league. He was drafted in the 2nd round, I believe, but we look at him as a guy who's a bona fide wide receiver too, and a really good young receiver in this league, a budding star. So that's the thing. You kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, maybe these top 6 guys aren't going to be Julio Jones, but if you can get a really quality wide receiver 2 who has upside to be a wide receiver 1, I don't think there's any reason you should bat an eye at that and think they're not a day 1 starter type of thing.
Dave, what are your thoughts on Orlovsky's tweet and sort of the upper echelon wide receivers in this class?
I mean, normally I feel like Dan Orlovsky is a pretty level-headed guy.
Yeah, that's what's weird about this
for the most part. But man, he got the clicks, didn't he? By putting something out like that. So he's getting the engagement, and that's what it's about. I would say that to me, there are 2 guys I could see just based on today, right, that I feel like could be upper echelon guys. Jameson Williams, to me, if he comes back from the injury, I feel like could be that guy. He could be like, it's the comps you say, it's hard to do that, but you look at him and you're like, Alabama stature, the way he runs his routes, it's like, I look at him and I'm like, okay, is this the next Calvin Ridley coming out of Alabama? And Calvin Ridley was always kind of the number 2 to Julio for a while, got his chance to be the number 1, was producing, and then obviously stepped away from the game. So it's like, could he be that level of guy? Maybe. And then the other guy, to me, that's a wild card that could emerge and but possibly be more to maybe like the poor man's DK Metcalf is Christian Watson in this draft. The good combine numbers, the really good Senior Bowl performance, albeit in limited volume, turned heads at the Senior Bowl practices, talked about the combine, ran the 4.36, and has the physical size and stature that you could say, like, okay, like this could be a guy, maybe not in year 1, but in year 2 or 3, he could be that guy. That's based on traits, right? Like, I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not. Like, DK Metcalf was an absolute physical freak of nature, had an amazing combine, and still ended up getting picked in the 2nd round. So, look, I like a lot of the guys. I like Wilson. I like Olave. I like Dodson too, even. But the top end, we were spoiled last year, right? You had Jamar Chase. You had Jalen Waddle. You had Devontae Smith, right? Like, you had those upper echelon guys. And then the year prior, you have guys like Justin Jefferson getting picked, right? And obviously other guys that haven't panned out as much, like Jalen Reagor's of the world, but you got that Justin Jefferson in that draft. And so is there going to be a guy like that in this draft? I don't know. I still think that the top end of the draft is talented, but I just don't know that it's like very, very top heavy. Like we had last year, we had 3 guys picked in what would like the top 10, I think, right? 3 receivers picked in the top 10. I don't think I think maybe you have 1 picked in the top 10 this year.
And that's what's going to get interesting too, because we're about to get into the draft board now. And I only put 5 guys on my round 1 board, and we're going to get to the board in a second. And there are going to be some names that could easily go in the first round, because it's almost like, well, you know, it's sort of like whatever the flavor of the GM and the team is.
Yep.
Like, I don't have a first round projection on Christian Watson, but a team could look at Christian Watson and be like, no, I do have a first round projection.
Absolutely.
So I tried my best to do a consensus board here of what I think is going to happen in the NFL draft, but I think at least in the first 3 rounds, it's pretty fluid. Calvin Austin could come off the board in the second round, but I have a 3rd round projection on him, just because I'm trying to play it safe with a little bit. And just like running backs, I went back and I did the 3-year averages. The 3-year average of wide receivers drafted is 33. So 33 wide receivers is the 3-year average. So keep that in mind. When there's 45 guys in this draft that you like, they're not all going to get drafted. The first round average number of wide receivers on average the last 3 years taken in the first round, 4.
And that's with 2 wide receiver heavy first rounds in the last 2 years as well.
And the 3-year average for wide receivers in the second round, 6. So I think you're going to see a lot of wide receivers. I think you're going to see a lot of the edge rushers. I think because a lot of teams are weaker on the offensive line, I think you could see a lot of these tackles and even some of these interior guys go off the board early. These defensive tackles go off the board early. It could push some of these wide receivers into the second round that maybe we aren't expecting. So I want people to keep that in mind. Looking at the 3-year averages, it's 4 in the first round. It's 6 in the second. I wouldn't be surprised if 3 wide receivers go in the first round and then 7 go in the second round in keeping up with those averages, just because I think that there is some top heavy in some other spots. But, let's get right to the board here. We got the first round of the draft board. I have these 5 receivers as my projected first round possibilities at wide receiver. Garrett Wilson from Ohio State, Jamison Williams from Alabama, Drake London from USC, Chris Olave from Ohio State, and Treylon Burks from Arkansas. Dave, anyone there you think deserves to be on this list that's not on this list? Who are your favorites on this list?
I actually think it's a really great list, to be honest with you. My favorites on the list are obviously Williams, and I really like Wilson. I think of that group, I think Wilson might be the most realistic for the Bills at 25 if they wanted to go that route. I do like Olave as well, but I like Wilson a little more. I just think he's a little bit more polished in his route running. And I mean, Kendall probably could talk more about the film on him, but like, it just seems like to me, like right now, Wilson is a little bit more of a complete receiver, a little bit more of the guy that can step in day one and contribute. But I mean, you're splitting hairs here, right? With these guys. Drake London is an interesting one because he is one where there are it's seemingly a lot of different opinions on him, but he's still seemingly a consensus first round guy. So I really don't have any qualms about that. I think he's a faster, beefier version of his former alum, Michael Pittman. I think that's kind of how I look at Drake London. This is a guy that is not afraid of contact, right? Yeah. When he catches the ball, he reminds me of a running back, like when he catches the ball, in the sense that not that he's like the shiftiest guy, but he's not afraid to lower the shoulder and run someone over. So the one guy that, I mean, I think I agree with you as far as 4 of the 5. Treylon Burks is the one to me where I'm still not totally sold. I think the size enamors people. He obviously didn't have the great combine. So I think what you see is that a guy like Treylon Burks is going to have a wide variety of opinion, right? And like you said, it just takes one GM to fall in love with that size and kind of invest. But he would be the one that I would maybe have the most concern about, like looking at the nice shiny object and it not maybe panning out. at the next level. So, but overall, I would say your list is pretty good. Dotson might be the only one I might sneak onto that list as a potential additional first rounder.
Yeah, Dotson is the one that I think too. Christian Watson, I think, could have a lot of fans. The Burks thing is interesting. And Kendall, I'm gonna let you speak on Treylon Burks a little bit. And I know Don's in the chat, and Don, I don't want to hurt your feelings.
Seriously. Yeah.
But here are some of the things that I have heard and read about Treylon Burks that people have said. And who knows, like this could be like disinformation, things people are trying to do to lower guys' draft stock, etc. But what people are saying about Treylon Burks is, and Kendall, you could speak to this because I know you've been watching film, takes plays off. When he knows the play is not going to him, he'll take plays off. Not the most polished route runner, things of that nature. Those to me seem like things that would scare the Buffalo Bills, a very processy oriented team, away from a player like Treylon Burks. What do you think about what you've seen on tape of Treylon Burks? Do you see some of those things that people are referring to?
I'll be honest, I didn't really see it a ton. There were times that he took, I guess, less effort. He took some plays off in terms of effort as a blocker, but I'm not always going to hold that against wide receivers because when they're on the other side of a play, sometimes them blocking really doesn't even matter. But other times when they know the play call and you can see that they turn it on and they make sure that they keep their guy engaged and they make sure that they keep that gap secure for whoever the runner is on that play. So there are times that you can see some lack of effort. There was one play in particular where he got a gimmicky type of target and he was running up the sideline and he had a chance to turn it upfield. And he's a really good player when he has the ball in his hands after the catch. And for whatever reason, he ran out of bounds and he shied away from contact. And I know a lot of coaches, Kenneth Walker talks about this at Michigan State, coaches get on him if he runs out of bounds. Like you go and you find contact and you churn out extra yards. And on that one particular play, Treylon Burks did not do that. And like anyone who's watched Treylon Burks knows that he has plenty of run after the catch ability. So it's kind of upsetting when you see a rep like that, where he's like accepting a 5-yard gain when it could have been maybe 10 or a touchdown given his abilities. So
yeah, and you saw Sean McDermott like after that New England game in the regular season was like, yeah, Devin Singletary set the tone right away when he like broke that tackle after 3 yards and ran for 10.
Exactly. That's the kind of thing. It's a tone setter for the team. And and Treylon Burks has that strength too, where not only could he run away from people on tape, he runs away from people. I know he didn't run a great 40, but he runs away from people and he really works up momentum and he's tough to tackle. So that one play was discouraging, but I'm not holding it against him completely. The things I hold against Burks are more the manufactured touches that he gets and the lack of polish as a route runner because he isn't asked to do it a lot. Yeah. And when he does do it, he's a bigger dude. He struggles to throttle down because he's, 220 pounds. It's hard to throttle down quickly with that weight and all that momentum moving forward and then break for an out route or an in route or a hitch back to the quarterback, whatever it is. He struggles a little bit in that area. And I don't deny that he can improve. And I think that's why he should still be considered a first round talent. And I think a team will probably take a chance on him in the first round. But I'm personally not someone who would, but I totally understand why someone would. Cause when you watch him on tape, man, he pops. There's a lot to work with there. And it's very intriguing.
Went off against Bama. I mean, who goes off against Bama?
I want to ask you guys a question on Burks, right? Because I keep going back to DK Metcalf. He is a good case study of a guy who, like you just mentioned, Kendall, wasn't super polished as a route runner in college. Didn't do there wasn't a lot of nuance, but he had the straight line speed and he had the size. He slid to the second round, and now every team's looking back and saying, like, why didn't we take a chance on this guy?
Exactly.
So our team's going to have lack of buyer. Like, our team's going to have, like, not buyer's remorse or the opposite of, like, not buying on DK Metcalf and potentially over swinging the other way and saying, like, we're not going to miss out again. We're going to go for a guy like Burks, even though numbers-wise at the combine, he wasn't really even close to what DK did. But potentially teams see what they missed out on in DK and say, we're going to be willing now to take a guy like this earlier than maybe we would have otherwise.
I think that's a very valid point, and people in the chat are saying like Burks is not Metcalf. He's a worse AJ Brown. And no, it's I think it's very fair because I think teams will do that. They'll be like, okay, it's a similar type of guy. It's obviously he didn't test nearly as well, but he's a similar type of body, similar type of athleticism. But where it changes, and I think teams will do that. I do think they will course correct for that. And whether it's right or wrong, they probably will course correct for that DK Metcalf thing. But I think the big difference is where DK Metcalf struggled to throttle down and sharpen off those routes and stuff like that. He was so physically dominant and he could separate himself at the catch point with like jumping and pure athleticism and physicality. Burks had a really bad vertical. Like he did not have a good vertical jump, and it doesn't show on tape either. When he wins in 50-50 catch scenarios, it's because of toughness and pure physicality. It's not because he's jumping higher than the other guy. It's not because he has longer arms than the other guy, but he has really strong hands. He has really big hands. So there is some comparison there. But I understand everything the chat is saying about he's not.
I guess that's my point, right? The chat saying he's not DK, yet we're talking about Treylon Burks as a first rounder. DK went in second. So obviously the teams missed on DK, right? DK clearly should have been a first rounder and he wasn't picked in the first. So it's almost like that's why I'm like, I agree with the comment section where they're saying he's not DK. Like, why are we talking about him as a first rounder then?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just me.
And so your boy Lettuce had a super chat earlier that I put up, but I didn't have a chance to speak on it. He said his guy is Drake London from USC. Kendall, I know you like Drake London too. So I'm going to ask you in a second, Kendall, like what your thoughts are on Drake London. And again, I don't want to get too Dan Orlovsky in here and be throwing out crazy comps and things like that. You mentioned Dave, Michael Pittman. I think that's a fair assessment of Drake London's game. But there are some websites where you can go in and you can type in sort of the player's physical traits, et cetera. We were going over it after the show the other night, and it sort of pops out playing style comps. It shoots out like, physical comps and things like that. Some of them are outlandish, but you can sort of use it as a baseline to brainstorm. And I saw a comp for Drake London today, and it's sort of like stuck with me a little bit. And I want your thoughts on this, Kendall. Drake London, Michael Thomas.
I see it in a sense because he can be seen as more of like a possession type receiver. But I don't see that. When I see Drake London, I see Michael Thomas. And I think when people hear me say that, they're like, oh, okay, so he's just a contested catch guy. And that's the narrative out on Drake London right now. And I've been doing my darndest to try and tell people that he can separate. It's just not the same as dudes that are 5'11", 180. He's 6'2" and change, 215 plus pounds, but the dude runs fluidly. He played basketball, and it shows. His release package is great. He is a Mike Evans with better separation and athleticism, in my opinion. He's so good at contested catch situations, but he can separate at the release point. He can separate midway through his route. He can separate at the top of his route. He can separate on double moves. He understands coverages. He understands leverage and zone and how to space out that zone. He understands how to play the game and how to do it well. And obviously, I know no one cares about this, but he's my best blocking wide receiver in the draft. And I know a lot of people are going to say he doesn't really fit the Bills. And I can agree to an extent because he is redundant to Gabe Davis. Very similar in that regard. He was used in a similar way to Gabe Davis at USC in a blocking type of manner. But think about the quasi 11 personnel we could run with Drake London and Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis or London in the slot doing their blocking responsibilities. You don't know if it's run or pass. And hey, if you do a play action and you have that leak out off of the fake block, guess who's wide open? It's Gabe Davis or Drake London. So I'm not saying it's a perfect fit, but we saw the Bills were in on Evan Ingram And that's a quasi 11 personnel type situation. Drake London is a better Evan Ingram, in my opinion. I don't think anyone would argue that Evan Ingram is better than Drake London.
Another guy I wanted to touch on before we move on to round two is obviously sort of the elephant in the room, the injured guy, right? Jameson Williams, 6'1", 180 pounds. Interesting play style comp. And I read it. I'm like, the fuck? Deshaun Jackson. That was the comp. It was essentially a taller, stronger version of Deshaun Jackson, a guy who is going to be very, very good going vertical. But does Jameson Williams have more nuance to his game than to just be that vertical down the field type of threat?
I didn't see it on tape, but I don't deny that he can become that. When I watched him, it was a lot of deep overs, posts, go routes, stuff like that. And then when he did do the more like nuanced in breaking routes, dig routes, out routes, whatever it was, there was just some stiffness to his game. There was just like a little bit of stiffness and it wasn't super fluid, but I think he will be a more nuanced route runner than Deshaun Jackson. I don't think he is right now, but I think he will get there. I know for a fact I'm lower on him. Like I have Jahan Dotson higher than Jameson Williams, and that's purely from a route running perspective.
His speed
is undeniable.
His speed is pull the trigger at 25 speed, right?
Yes. Yes. That's the thing. So Jameson Williams is my wide receiver 5, but all 5 of the wide receivers I have, I would take it 25. Treylon Burks is the one who's my wide receiver 6, who I wouldn't take at 25, and I'm hoping some team takes him before 25. I like the player, but I wouldn't take him at 25. So I love Jameson Williams in the regard of like, oh my God, what he would do to this offense. It would be great. Like the way he would take the top off the defense and how they would have to respect that speed and how it would open stuff up on the underneath and all of that stuff is great. But right now, as he currently stands, I don't love his separation ability because it relies so much on his speed and not nuance in his route running. That being said, there's room to grow, and you can see that he has the ability to grow in that area because you can see it sometimes on tape, but it's just a little stiff and it needs a little bit more polish. So that's why he's my wide receiver 5, but it's not for like a shortage of confidence. I just don't love the pure speed separation style. I'd like to see more than that.
Last 2 names here, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. I see a lot of comps to OBJ with both of them, and I don't hate those comps. I think they both obviously probably have a little bit more maybe speed, or maybe it's just a little younger before some of the injuries started to pile on with OBJ. But Garrett Wilson's probably out of the Buffalo Bills range at this point. But Dave, I look at these 5 receivers and I think that Chris Olave is the best fit. Like I look at him and I'm like, I see that one as the guy that I'm drawn to the most because I can picture him operating in this offense with the Buffalo Bills. Would you agree that Chris Olave of these 5 might be the best fit? And what do you see in Olave's game?
I think as a fit, you're right. I do, that you mentioned that, I do kind of like that comparison in a way. Olave's a little bigger than Wilson, a little thicker. I mean, they're almost identical in size when it comes to measurables, but he is a little bigger. I think that obviously when you're talking about the difference between Wilson and Olave, you're basically saying like, okay, do I want a guy who's going to be mainly a slot guy for my team, which is probably going to be more like the Wilson type, or do you want a guy who's probably going to be more, maybe not as versatile as as a true inside outside guy, but maybe brings you a little more on the outside? I think that it's a tough one for me. I think as a player, I like Wilson a little more. But I can see your point about Olave being a better fit for the Bills, especially now after they signed Jamison Crowder. You could sit there and say, well, we still kind of need that guy who's got that inside-outside ability, and maybe Olave is that guy for the Bills as a fit. And look, Crowder's only there for 1 year, so you say, okay, well, this is still a long-term investment? Great. Olave, great at separation. Right? Ton of yards after catch ability if he can get in position. tracks the ball well vertically. So
I mean, it's
like
insane. His ball tracking is nuts.
yeah, I mean, he's not going to give you anything on special teams as far as returnability, but
Mhm.
from a versatility standpoint, he could play inside and out. I mean, I don't have
Yeah.
his snap counts in front of me, but I mean, Kendall, you probably know off the top of your head his breakdown. But so for that reason, I think you're right, Steve, as far as the fit.
Yeah, because I think he offers you like body control and some of that stuff that I think would work really good with Josh Allen. I think he gives you a speed slot option, a guy who can take you vertical from the slot, and then he can also go out and play on the boundary. So that's just why I like Chris Olave the most as a fit. I'm not saying he's the best receiver of the 5. I just like him the most as a fit, even though Kendall's been selling me a little bit on Drake London here. The more he talks about Drake London,
I mean,
I'm like, yeah, hope he drops
he's not a perfect fit. Drake London is not a perfect fit, and I acknowledge that. I just really like the wide receiver, so I continue to talk myself into how.
I mean, that could be a blessing though for the Bills, right? Because if Drake London ends up getting picked earlier, maybe Olave falls into their lap at 25.
We're gonna be trading Stephon Diggs next week anyway because we're not gonna want to pay him.
Oh God, don't jump the gun.
All right, so second round wide receivers now. Looking at the wide receivers who I think are going to be sort of in that second round range. Again, all it takes is one team falling in love for these guys to go in the first round. And Jahad Dotson is number 1 with a bullet, I think, in the second round. I think he ends up going in the 30s somewhere. So you have Jahad Dotson of Penn State. You have Sky Moore of Western Michigan. You have George Pickens of Georgia. You have Christian Watson of North Dakota State. I think this guy's a second rounder. I think that everyone is undervaluing him. I think his combine puts him into play in the second round, and that's Alec Pierce from Cincinnati. And John Mechie, I think reports are that he might even be able to start training camp or at least start by the time the season starts. So I think as teams start to get to visit with John Mechie, as teams start to get a vibe for how his injury is progressing and healing, they're going to go and they're going to watch the tape on John Mechie and realize they're getting a late first round, early second round receiver, possibly in the back half of the second round or the early third round. So these are the wide receivers that I put a second round projection on. Dave, I'll start with you. Flame me as you may.
I mean, I can't really flame you for this. I mean, the only thing that I would say is that that second round projection maybe for Pierce is a little bit recency bias based on his combine. But then again, that's why you go to the combine, right?
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, NFL GMs.
And
this
he's
guy
not
is
Brad.
6'3". This guy is 6'3", 211, 4'4", 140. His vertical was off the charts.
Do you remember back in it must have been October or November? I wasn't even thinking about the draft, and I made a tweet about Alec Pierce because I was just like, this guy is legit. I was watching that bowl game.
He's really good.
And he's legit. Had the good RAS, tested well at the combine. He produced on film. He goes up and gets the ball. He's competitive. I mean, there's not a lot of holes in his game, right? I mean, maybe not the twitchiest guy. Fine. I could give him that. But do the Bills need that right now? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. So that combine that he had, plus what he's already done, production wise on top of the RAS, he could sneak in there. I would say if it was me, if you were going to slide that 6th guy into the second round, it would probably be Calvin Austin for me.
Yeah,
but
same.
You can slide him in there. Yep.
Yeah, I could see where you're going with there. I probably flip Calvin Austin and Alec Pierce. Though.
And by chance comes in and says Judge loves him some combine and some RAS. Listen, this is me projecting what I think is going to happen, not what I would do. I would not touch I would trade up in the third round for Alec Pierce. I would not take Alec Pierce in the second round. I personally don't have a second round grade on Alec Pierce. I think this is what's going to happen. I think Alec Pierce's size, speed combo, his vertical, all that good stuff is going to move him up. And I do think any number of teams could fall in love with Calvin Austin and take him in the second round. I would take Calvin Austin in the second round. I think his size docks him down to the third. That's just what I think is going to happen based on my very amateurish years of experiencing the NFL draft and trying to go to various different websites, comparing big boards, and sort of just putting my own little spin on what I'm seeing and some of the things I'm hearing. So thank you for acknowledging that you were
Yeah, I
just
was
trying to
just gonna
grind my
put that
gears
up.
tonight.
Well, I think what you're doing as far as
Mhm.
like averages per round is
Yeah.
really interesting information, right? Because
There's one website that had 10 guys with the second round grade. I'm like, 10 guys aren't getting taken in the second round.
exactly, that's the thing. Like it's
Someone
still
has
a
to drop.
numbers game
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and it also depends on what teams want at that point in the draft and their value to need preposition at that point in the draft. So the averages to me are a great story. And I mean, even if you went back probably to the last 5 years, it probably is fairly consistent. So interesting.
Looking at sort of, I want to talk about these top two guys first. And that's Jahan Dotson and Sky Moore. Well, first of all, Alec Pierce, while we're on Alec Pierce, he's a faster Gabriel Davis to me. Like, do you guys see that in his game, Kendall? What do you think when I say faster Gabriel Davis for Alec Pierce?
Do you know what that website had as his play style comp off the
Mike
top
Evans.
of your head?
Mike Evans.
Yeah, I don't love that. I don't
Cody,
love that.
oh, not play
What
style.
it is funny you say that
That
though,
was
because
physical trade,
I do look at Alec Pierce as a watered down Drake London in a way. And I don't mean that as any sort of slight on Alec Pierce. He's really good in contested catch situations. Dude elevates over DBs, like so strong in his hands, really solid hands catcher, versatile outside slot. Like since he motioned him into inline tight end at times to block for their running game, really well-rounded. Oh, this is it. Yeah. Last night, if you haven't checked it out, check it out after this. Russ comped him to Jordy Nelson, or he didn't comp him, but he showed how comparable the testing numbers were.
But I've heard people comp Gabriel Davis to Jordy Nelson in the past.
Okay. So I think the difference that I have with that is that I think Alec Pierce is a better route runner than Gabe Davis is. And I'm not sure he's a better separator, but he has better route running principles and an understanding of how to shape his routes and attack defensive backs in a way to maximize his separation. I think the separation will come and he'll get better at it. But you can see it's there, and he has the crux of what needs to be done there. So he's a very complete player. I like him a lot. Same with Dave. I think he's going to be a round 3 guy, but there's no way, in my opinion, if he drops past round 3, Bill's got to trade up for him. I really like him. Really well-rounded skill set.
These two guys, Jahan Dotson, Sky Moore, it's kind of like the Spider-Man meme because I'm hearing all the same comps for both of these guys. Obviously, Jahan Dotson, 5'11", 178. Sky Moore, 5'10", 195. So Sky Moore is a little bit more bulkier. Jahan Dotson ran a 4.43. Sky Moore ran a 4.41. I've heard Brandon Cooks with both of these guys. I've heard Deontay Johnson with both of these guys. Deontay Johnson's inability to catch the football last season makes me a little hesitant because of how good of a catcher of the football guy like Jahan Dotson is. And I heard one for Sky Moore. Golden Tate is a name that starts to get thrown around with some of these guys. And I really like Golden Tate as a comp for a guy like Sky Moore. But pick your poison here. Dave, I'm going to start with you, and then Kendall, I'm going to go to you. Here's the question. Would you rather Jahan Dotson in round 1 or Sky Moore in round 2? So I'm not going to say would you rather have Jahan Dotson or Sky Moore, because I think everyone here would take Jahan Dotson over Sky Moore.
Value proposition.
But the value proposition here, Jahan Dotson at 25 or Sky Moore at 57, which one are you pulling the trigger on?
I'm taking Sky Moore at 57 if those are the options available to me, just because I think in round 1, I'd want my options at that point to either be one of the premier interior offensive linemen or one of the premier corners, right? And so if I know that I can get one of those in round 1 at 25, and my consolation prize for not taking a receiver at 25, like not taking Dotson at 25, is that I get Sky Moore at 57. And let's say I pair Sky Moore with like an Elam or or some other corner that like a McDuffie or someone like that would be around at 25. I feel like that's pretty good. Like a Zion Johnson at 25 and a Sky Moore at 57. Like, okay, yeah, I didn't address corner, but I feel pretty good because I feel like the value I'm going to get maybe out of that pick 25 might be a little more from taking Sky Moore at 57 than if I were to take Dotson at 25.
Kendall, how about you? You taking Dotson at 25 or you taking Sky Moore at 57?
I would take Sky Moore at 57 because I want a cornerback in round 1. That's really like the only reason why. But for the sake of, talking about different guys, I want to talk about Jahan Dotson. To me, he has the best hands in this draft. Dude
I agree with
plucks the
that.
ball out of the air
I agree
like
with that.
effortlessly. This dude catching the football, it is effortless to him. The way he tracks it down the field and how he can contort his body to make tough catches that are off the frame. He had not great quarterback play at Penn State, and he produced regardless. So I love that about him. Obviously, people overlook hands because you assume everyone has to have good hands to play the position, but his stand out. And then aside from that, his route running nuance is up there with Garrett Wilson. For me, I just said Alec Pierce is a watered down Drake London. To me, Jahan Dotson is a watered down Garrett Wilson. I think they're very similar, but I think Jahan Dotson has much better hands. Garrett Wilson has some issues with concentration drops. Really good hands, but he just struggles with concentration drops, and he needs to figure that out. But I love Jahan Dotson. If the Bills do it in the first round, I'd love it. But where I am right now and where the Bills are right now, I want a quarterback, premium pick at the cornerback position. So for this value proposition, I'm saying Sky Moore at 57.
It doesn't seem to me like now that the Bills signed Crowder that Dotson would be the pick at 25. Now it could be, but I think I would be more I wouldn't be upset with the player, right? I like him, but if the Bills are sitting there at 25 and they took Dotson over like a Olave, I would kind of be upset about that.
Yeah. I have Olave as my wide receiver 3 and Dotson as my wide receiver 4. So yeah, by my board, I would also be upset with that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you got to trust Bean.
I guess
got to trust our guy.
I guess the question is like when we're talking about all these wide receivers, like what are we looking for the Bills when we're talking about these receivers? Are we looking for something long term? Like what are we looking beyond 2022? Are we looking for someone who's going to help us right now in 2022, especially when we start talking about like second rounders, right? You would imagine that's going to be a blend of maybe some contribution in 2022, hopefully a decent amount, and beyond, right? Like, so a guy in the second round, it's premium draft capital, but you have to almost think beyond 2022 a little bit with the second rounder, right? Crowder's here for 1 year. What is the future beyond Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis?
And you look at a guy like Jahan Dotson too, and you look at Jamison Crowder's contract. If Jahan Dotson just happens to be the best value on the board and the Buffalo Bills feel like they have to take Jahan Dotson and they get to training camp and Jahan Dotson is just out playing Jamison Crowder, like, does James Crowder have to make the football team? Like, not with that contract. He doesn't have to. I think in the perfect world, you would want him to. But if the draft falls a certain way, like it just so happens the draft comes after free agency. It sucks. And sometimes, stuff happens in the draft and you got to take a guy who just sort of takes the job of someone else who's already on your roster. Or like you wouldn't have made that move in free agency if you had known that guy was going to be there in the draft at a certain spot. So like say Jahan Dotson's sitting there at 57, you're the Buffalo Bills, you got to pull the trigger, right? Like you have to. So, even if that means having to make the tough decision and, cutting a guy like maybe Jamison Crowder once the season starts, if you can't fit him into your depth chart. Because I think that's a mistake. If you pass on a guy who's the highest on your board because you had just signed a guy whose contract is not that hard to get out of, that's bad drafting. So I think the Buffalo Bills, I don't think Jamison Crowder's contract stops them from drafting a smaller guy, even though you're spot on. Like, where's the fit? I understand that, but I don't think their contract stops them from doing that.
That's why I like Olave, because he could go anywhere on the field.
And Jahan Dotson can play on the outside too.
Yeah, he can. He
play
can.
on the outside.
Yeah, I've seen some concerns about that, but I don't think it'll be a problem for him at the next level. Jim, can I talk about this?
Well, the thing I was going to say is I remember a couple of years ago when Brandon Beane sat down with Matthew Fairburn to talk about Devin Singletary, who played at FAU. The comment he made to Matthew Fairburn was the Buffalo Bills focus on the Power 5, and then they circle back to non-Power 5 at the end of the season. and they go back and they use things like film evaluation, combine, Senior Bowl, etc., to scout some of these small schoolers. So it's not I don't think that precludes a guy like Sky Moore from being on the Buffalo Bills board. But what were you going to say here?
I was just going to say, I love everything that Dean does, but don't use his evidence that someone was there as those are only the guys that the Bills are interested in. And if someone wasn't there, then they're not interested or even doing homework on them. Because I went and did homework, Judge. You know the game that I went to. So I went to a Utah State game, and I went to Live Scout because Trey McBride was there. And this was before I was totally convinced on Dawson Knox. So I went to Live Scout Trey McBride. And as I get up into the press box, I shake hands with Mr. Joe Shane of the Buffalo Bills, assistant GM of then the Buffalo Bills. And I went and checked Dean's list, and Dean doesn't have the Bills scouting Utah State at all this year. So I'm not saying Dean doesn't do great work, because Dean does great work. I don't know how he gets all of the info that he gets and puts it together so easily to consume by the eye, but it's not just because he doesn't have something on there doesn't mean the Bills weren't there or that the Bills didn't do their homework on a player, because I know for a fact Joe Shane was there watching Trey McBride, Devin Tompkins, who we'll probably get to later in this show, and other Utah State players, and the punter from Colorado State.
It pained me to slot Devin Tompkins where I slotted Devin Tompkins. It pained me.
Sure it did.
But I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but I saw Randy tweeting it earlier that Buffalo wasn't at Cincinnati's pro day. So I'm waiting for Luke Fickell I'm waiting for Luke Fickell to post a video calling out the Buffalo Bills. But to me, that doesn't mean that Kobe Bryant isn't on the Bills board, because Bruce Nolan was talking on Twitter today, like, that guy fits what Sean McDermott would love in a cornerback to a T. Just because maybe they've already done enough work on Cincinnati, they don't need to go to the pro day. Like, they don't need to go see that. They've interviewed the guys, they've seen the tape, like they know the numbers from the combine, et cetera, et cetera. They feel comfortable. They don't feel like wasting the resource to go to the pro day. Like, so I think there are a number of variables in mind when, talking about it. And Randy says, according to Jim Nagy, the Bills weren't there. So maybe the Buffalo Bills are trying to hide their interest, play fucking mind games. Like, you never know. Like, again, a guy like Gabriel Davis was not on my board because the Bills never visited with him. I didn't hear the Bills were at the UCF pro day or this or that. So I never really looked at Gabriel Davis, and the Buffalo Bills took Gabriel Davis in the 4th round. I was thoroughly unprepared when we did that draft show to talk about Gabriel Davis. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. Exactly. Like I said, you thoroughly got to work your way through the sport. And these guys are NFL professional. It's a professional National Football League organization. Every dude on this draft board, they have checked, double checked, triple checked, quadruple checked. There are guys whose names we don't even know of that these guys have probably done intensive research on.
Exactly.
I mean, some of these guys that I'm seeing at some of these pro days, I'm like, there are thousands of guys who are draft eligible this year. It's absolutely crazy. And we hone in on 400 of them. But a couple of names here on the 2nd round board that are left. John Mechie. I love John Mechie as a fit. I think he's got boundary flex. I think he can be a speed slot. I think he's a really good route runner. You see that video posted all over Twitter of him deep-pantsing one of the better corners in this draft in Roger McCreary. John Mechie's my dude. I would absolutely love John Mechie. I think I'd feel more comfortable trading up for him in the 3rd round. I think that's where the best value is. But man, if the Buffalo Bills could combine John Mechie with Stephon Diggs and with Gabriel Davis, that to me is a sexy trio right there. And he's got flex. He's got flex to do more. Dave, what are your thoughts on a guy like John Mechie?
As far as the 2nd round guys, I mean, you gave me the option Dotson versus Sky Moore. Like, Mechie would be the guy that I would absolutely love to take at 57, because obviously value suppressed. You wonder about him coming back from the injury, but if you hit on that pick and you get a 1st round, bona fide 1st round guy that should have been a 1st round guy, most likely in any other year or without the injury, to pair with Diggs and Davis long term, man, you are set. You are really set. And not to mention the 2nd round. Like, yes, you don't get the 5th year option, but that cost control you have on that player for 4 years, of the caliber like that for a team that the third receiver is super important to the Bills. Mechie to me is the guy that brings an element that you're not getting from Diggs and Davis. And so that's what really excites me about Mechie, because you then have this trio where you have every possible route, every possible style, every possible level of creativity you could think you could put into the offense is at your disposal with those three. And then all of a sudden you add Dawson Knox as to that mix as a guy you already have. Like, it would be incredible. And I think the Bills have to sit there and look at, like, we can't just sit here and stay pat with Diggs and Davis. And yes, we signed Crowder, and yes, we re-signed McKenzie. Like, we need to be constantly trying to not even just stay where we are, but still try to get even marginally better on offense.
Yeah.
And I know it's super hard to do, but adding a guy like Mechie can do that for you. So he would be my pick if the Bills ended up passing on a receiver in the first round. He would be the guy I would want in the second round.
Yeah. Last guy to touch on here. I think he's a guy that gets overlooked in a lot of conversations. I'm not high on him, and that's because I think he's a boundary-only receiver, and I don't like the lack of flexibility there. And Kendall, correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but George Pickens, 6'3", 195, 4'4", 340. Everyone and their mother wants to comp him to fellow Georgia Bulldog and AJ Green. I mean, this guy could have been a first-round wide receiver. Like, he's that ex-wide receiver type of guy if he didn't tear that ACL and miss most of the season.
Mm-hmm.
George Pickens, like, what are your thoughts on this guy? I don't think he could play the slot. I don't think he's got that inside-outside versatility. So I'm not the biggest fan in the world, mostly because I want a more versatile guy who can play multiple spots. But am I being too picky? Is he so good at what he does well that he's worthy of the Buffalo Bills picking in the first or second round?
I don't think you're necessarily being too picky. I think because you like George Pickens, the player, just not necessarily the fit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think in a sense you're being too picky, assuming he doesn't fit in the same way. Like, I just talked you into, to an extent, Drake London fitting into the offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could get a similar style of he fits into this offense with George Pickens. I'm just checking right now to double check his alignments. I can't find it quick enough. But anyways, he's a really good receiver, really well-rounded everywhere. Like, he's a solid route runner. He can separate at a good level for his size, and he's very physical and tough just about at every point of the field, like at the release point, at the catch point. Once he has the ball in his hands, he plays with plenty of energy. The fact that he plays with good toughness from every point of the field gives me the vibe that he could operate in the slot, even though he may not have at Georgia. And I don't think it would be a perfect fit for him if he had to do it, but I don't think you should rule out that versatility just because he hasn't. That being said, I think you are right that it's not something he would prefer to do. I don't think he would be comfortable doing, and he would have to work into it. And it would probably mean Gabe Davis would have to play more in the slot to give time to Pickens on the outside. Or Diggs.
And to be fair, like we've been sitting here gushing over Jahan Dotson, Sky Moore, Alec Pierce, John Mechie, Garrett Wilson. So clearly, us gushing over all these guys and sort of looking at George Pickens and going, means the Buffalo Bills have George Pickens as a guy they're targeting.
Yeah.
One guy we did forget, Christian Watson. I was super harsh in my pro comp to Christian Watson. I said a healthy, non-injured Brashad Perriman. That's why I think Christian Watson's being a little overhyped. I understand he's ball of clay. He's got the ceiling to be this really big alpha. He did a lot of things at North Dakota State that sort of like Debo does. He does all those certain things, but I'm not bought into Christian Watson playing against that lower level of competition. I didn't like his ability to fight for extra yards, things of that nature. I thought he was tackled and brought down pretty easily in some of the clips that I watched. I'm just not sold on. I like him, ball of clay. Don't get me wrong. If the Buffalo Bills think I'm an idiot, I'll agree with them. I'll side with them. But a guy like Christian Watson, if we hold back to 57 and take him, I'm fine with it. I don't envision the Buffalo Bills falling in love with a guy like Christian Watson, and I don't envision him falling to 57 because of all those tools that I mentioned. Dave, what are your thoughts on a guy like Christian Watson? He could be the sleeper first round pick.
Yeah, I mean that's what I said like earlier, right? Is like if there was a guy that had that sort of untapped ceiling that you could say like could become one of the alphas of this class, he certainly could. But it's a risk, right? It's a risk acceptance and a risk, risk benefit or however you want to phrase it, proposition when you go after a guy like that because of the lower level of competition. And in some cases, that lower level of competition has not negatively translated right to the next level, and in some cases it has. Brashad Perryman was a first round pick, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is he was a first round pick, but he had those just litany of injuries early in his career, and he never really got to where people maybe thought he could be because of those injuries. And so it's a different situation, but like I don't think it's an unfair comp. Brashad Perryman was a super physically gifted prospect coming out of that draft. And that's why he was picked in the first round, albeit late first round, but you could see something similar with Christian Watson this year. Like, I'm not going to be upset if the Bills take him at 57, if they pass on a receiver in the first round. But to me, it would depend on who else is on the board, right? If a guy like John Mechie's on the board and the Bills take Christian Watson over him, then that would signal to me that they have really a lot of concerns about his long-term prognosis with that ACL. And like, otherwise there would be no reason to pass on a guy like that. So I like Watson. I'm probably not as harsh on him as you are. I actually think like he could be a fairly special player. And at worst, I would figure he could easily operate as a number 3 receiver in the Bills offense. But again,
I think any receiver you take in the first turn, none of the receivers you take are going to bust in the Bills offense. Like, they'll be good, but like I think the question you have to ask yourself with any of these wide receivers is what happens when Stephon Diggs goes away? Because I do think there's an argument to be made that after his contract is up in 2 years, he's not here anymore.
I'll say this to answer that question. When Stephon Diggs goes away, it's not going to be a guy that you're picking in the second round that's replacing him. You're either spending premium draft capital to replace him, that's first round pick, or trading up in the first round to get someone, or you're doing what the Bills did when they acquired Stephon Diggs and you're going out and you're making that happen via a trade or in free agency to replace that alpha on your team. I don't see that happening with a guy in this draft, and I don't see that being Gabriel Davis, to be perfectly honest with you. So that replacement of Diggs is not something that I would even talk about when it comes to like, pick 57 in this draft,
All right. Third round wide receivers. And this is my favorite round because the top 2 guys are my dudes in this draft. Starting off with Calvin Austin from Memphis, who easily could go. I would feel comfortable taking him at 57. I docked him down a little bit because of his size. Kaiir Shakir out of Boise State. I got Wendell Robinson of Kentucky, formerly of Nebraska, and Jalen Tolbert of South Alabama. So these are the 4 receivers that I have a projected to go in the third round of the NFL draft. Going back and looking at my averages, the third round average for the last 3 years of wide receivers taken is 4. And since I did 5 wide receivers for the first round and I had 6 there in the second, I stayed with the 4. I didn't put a 5th guy in here on that third round board. I saved some guys for the 4th round because the average number of guys taken in the 4th round is 3 over the past 3 years. Calvin Austin, I mean, we've talked about this guy to death. He didn't even play that much in the slot at Memphis. That's where he's projected to play and operate in the pros. He can do that Isaiah McKenzie stuff. He is a nuanced route runner. He can even do stuff on the boundary despite his diminutive stature. He's an electric kick and punt returner. He's just a guy you want to get the ball in his hands, but he's still a pretty gosh darn polished receiver in his own right. And he's an absolute track star. So his diminutive stature will knock him, but I mean, the dude has got all the tools to be a highly successful NFL player. And then there's my guy, Kaiir Shakir, who I comp to Robert Woods. I think Kaiir Shakir is going to be one of the steals of this draft. You know, you look at his intangibles. He's just under 6 foot, 196 pounds, 4'4", 340. He's a willing blocker. He works over the middle of the field. His short area quickness is just in and out of his routes, breaking in and out of his routes. He's just so uber talented in just getting himself open. I think Khalil Shakir is the absolute steal of this draft. Or I envision him perfectly working the slot between a Gabriel Davis and a Stephon Diggs. So it doesn't hurt that I also see him as a perfect fit. But Dave, of these 4 names, and tell me if you think I got somebody missing here. Who's your dude in the 3rd round here of these 4 guys?
Probably Shakir, honestly. I really like Austin too, but again, I think he was punt return only in college. So if I'm going to invest in a guy that size, I like to see him have had some kick return experience. But with that said, the dude had an amazing combine, was the talk of the town at Senior Bowl practice as well. I think for me, it comes down to I like Shakir holding up longer in the league than Austin. Like Austin gets compared a lot to Rondale Moore from last year's draft, but Rondale Moore obviously had the incredible track record of return experience, kick and punt, and was just coming off the injury. So I think you're slotting him right, Calvin Austin. I think like probably could be flip him and Alec Pierce from your 2nd round, and Calvin Austin maybe could slide in the 2nd. But if you're talking about 3rd round guy in that list that you like right there, I like Shakir. I think when you watch him, the games I watched, he's getting tackled and somehow you see him kind of sneaking upfield for an extra yard or two. And you're like, where is he getting that extra yard or two?
He's
from?
tough to tackle.
How is he doing that? And it reminded me of, we didn't see it a ton, maybe necessarily last year, but it reminded me a little bit of Cole Beasley in the way that he put himself in position. The angles in which he caught the ball made it easy for him to just kind of like slide upfield. And I feel like that is what I liked out of Shakir, and then some, right? The ability to slide upfield, but not just like what we saw from Cole Beasley going down and putting the shoulder down into the ground, but staying up and getting an extra yard or 2 on top of that and fighting through defenders is what you really, at least what I saw from Shakir in the games I watched. So I'm with you, Steve. I think that we're going to get our hearts broken on this one because we're getting a little too invested in him, but
it's going to hurt watching him go to another team. It's going
to hurt when he goes in the division.
It feels like he's kind of becoming like, I feel like he's kind of becoming our Jalen Darden from last year in a way, or our Shai Smith from last year, which was kind of nice to see that neither one of them did much last year because we liked him so much. But anyway,
time will tell though.
He's the number 1 player that will break my heart when I see another team call his name. When I see him, when I see Khalil Shakir come off the draft board, like my heart's going to drop a little bit. Like I'm going to get a little nauseous. Off the board.
I like it. I'm not going to go as far to say that Jalen Tolbert's going to get picked in the 3rd round, though. I'm not sold on that yet. I'm not sold that he's a 3rd rounder yet.
I'll tell you what, like, because we're going to get to the 5th round in a second. There's a couple of names in the 4th round in a second. And there's even like Bo Melton, who I got a 5th round grade on. I think Bo Melton could slide up too. So, I mean, once you get to these third to 5th round, it's fluid. But
would you say the average was in the 3rd, 4 guys?
4 guys.
4 in the 3rd and 3 in the 4th, right?
And then 5 in the 5th. So again, like, you could have a crazy anomaly type of year where 6 guys go, but I just look at a guy like Jalen Tolbert, 6'1", 194 pounds. He ran that 4.49 40. I think he even improved upon that at his pro day. I'm not sure yet if I saw that or not. I haven't had a chance to go back and look at very many of the pro days, but I mean, I comped him to Josh Reynolds, who I think is just a solid pro. Like, he had some good years with the Rams. He got that bag in Tennessee, kind of fell off a little bit, went back to his guy, Jared Goff in Detroit, had a good year. So, and he re-signed there in Detroit. I don't think, Jalen Tolbert is going to ever be like a special wide receiver. But I do think he fits into a wide receiver room. He's got inside, outside flex. So, 3rd, 4th round for him. I do think
maybe I'm being too harsh on him.
But here's the thing,
I'm personally in the same boat as you on Jalen Tolbert. I'm lower on him than consensus, but I don't know. We could all.
You love Wendell, who's on this list.
Yeah.
Right?
So speak to Wendell a little bit.
Well, actually, can I start by saying I know the law of averages says 7 in rounds 3 and 4 combined. I think it's going to be more like 10. The
Yeah.
middle portion of this wide receiver
Plus
class
weaker
is
classes at other spots
strong.
too. Plus weaker
Yeah.
classes at other spots too.
So I really like the depth at this wide receiver class,
Mhm.
but I think it drops off after round 4. So I think a lot of wide receivers will be taken from rounds 1 through 4, and then it's going to really scale down on the back end, and we're going to see a lot more like UDFA wide receivers. But I will talk to my guy Wan'Dale Robinson. I heard a lot of people saying he just didn't do well at the combine, and I mean, most of that is really just about the fact that he was small. Like, he was just a smaller dude. So his RAS score gets like deflated because of that. But he still ended up with a 6 because he ran a 4.4440, which is good, not amazing for what you see on tape, but he's still a really fast dude. His 10-yard split is everything with his game. His 10-yard split is in the 98th percentile. This dude has acceleration and quickness for days. When you see him and you compare him with Calvin Austin, there's a lot of similarities, but Wan'Dale Robinson doesn't keep up on the long speed side of things where Calvin Austin does. And I think the other thing is Calvin Austin is a more proven and versatile wide receiver. He's more polished in the holistic regards to the position. Like, he's better at the release point. He's better at the top of his routes. He's just a better route runner in general. And the thing with Wan'Dale Robinson is he started as a running back, and then he transitioned into a wide receiver. And at his time as a wide receiver at Kentucky, he wasn't really tested all that much at his release point from the slot. So you can see he has the traits to do it, but he wasn't really ever tested to do it. And I mean, when you have foot quickness like that, you got to imagine that he can keep his body clean and do that kind of stuff to get off the line of scrimmage easily. But you need to see it to kind of check that box. And I can't personally check that box more than just saying he's sufficient and has the traits to do it. But he's really intriguing guy, super great playmaker, great with the ball in his hands. And I love what he could be in this offense more than just a gadget player, because you could see Kentucky used him as a gadget player first, but he ran real routes. It was just limited. It wasn't as frequent as a guy like Calvin Austin, like I mentioned. So if you want Calvin Austin and you can't get Calvin Austin, because I do think Calvin Austin's the better player, your consolation prize is Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't think it drops off all that far, but it is a drop off.
I mean, it's a guy you scheme the ball to. He can get you some yak. So definitely a weapon to have in your offense. Do you have any concerns that maybe what you would do with Wan'Dale is too similar to what you would do with Isaiah?
Yes and no. I think the thing is, it's kind of what I alluded to. A lot of the stuff you see with Wan'Dale is that gimmicky type of stuff, and you're like, we don't need another one of those. But also, don't we project Isaiah McKenzie to do a little bit more than just the gimmicky type of stuff this year? And if that is the case, then Wan'Dale just steps right in as your gadget guy, wide receiver, your punt returner, your kick returner, your guy that can play running back, wide receiver, Debo stuff that everyone's talking about nowadays. But I do have some concerns that it will translate to a true slot, but it's not enough concern for me to take him off my board and say he's just a gimmick, manufacture him touches type of guy, because he showed on tape he can do more than that. He has some understanding of how to run routes, but he's still learning that process. So I think it would be very valuable for him to come into a team like the Buffalo Bills, where he's not hard pressed to contribute right away, but he has all of the talent to do it, but he can learn along the way.
Wan'Dale over the course of his career, only 7 punt returns, which we're going to get to this conversation when we get to the UDFAs, because I have like 3 UDFA names highlighted of guys who have like 50 plus career punt returns in college. And I'm really interested in snagging a guy who's been there, done that. But some of these other guys who are getting drafted earlier, they were really good in college. So their college team isn't going to want to waste them on the kick and punt return unit. So there is some projection to whether they can be a kicker punt returner. You have that with Wan'Dale. But then my issue with that becomes, Well, you already have 2 projection guys, Marquez Stevenson and Isaiah McKenzie. So
Yeah,
it's
that's definitely the concerning part to it. But I mean, when
I
I see
want Britton Covey. I want Britton Covey.
when I see Wandale, I see Rondale.
Yeah.
Like, it's so hard for me to watch Wandale Robinson and not watch Rondale Moore. They're so similar in how they act with the ball in their hands and how they just turn into running backs once the ball is in their hands. So it's really special once you get the ball in his hands. It's just, how do you do it? And can he do it in a more traditional and conventional wide receiver way? So there's concerns, but I like the player.
All right, let's get into the 4th round now, because there's a player that everyone's going to pop their lids off for when I get to his name here. And he is the picture of the 4th rounders here. But 4th round receivers, again, I only went with 4. And the name that I think I've seen a lot in the comment section where people are going to be mad at me because I have him slotted into the next round. And Dave, feel free to yell at me because I know this is your guy, Romeo Doubs. 5th round projection for Doubs. A bunch of people have been talking about 4th round for him, but for the 4th round, the reason why a guy like Doubs dropped is because I think, everyone wants to talk about, the guy up top in Christian Watson. There's another small school, big ass wide receiver with speed, and Isaiah Weston from Northern Iowa, where if you haven't heard about him yet, we're going to have a conversation about him in a moment. You got David Bell, who I love David Bell, the receiver. And I know people say that I overreact to the combine. I do think David Bell's combine is going to drop him out of the day 2 of the draft. I do think it drops him into the upper half of round 4. Then you have a guy whose age might drop him into round 4, and that's Velus Jones Jr. from Tennessee. And then you have another guy who projects as a kick returner, punt returner, plenty of experience doing that. And he projects as a slot receiver. But unless you're a dynamic slot receiver, I think your value goes down the board to at least the 4th round. So I have a guy like Kyle Phillips as a 4th rounder, because I don't think he has versatility to play on the boundary. He's strictly a slot guy, and he's not a very dynamic slot guy. So looking at these guys in the first 4 rounds here, Isaiah Weston, David Bell, Velus Jones, Kyle Phillips, Dave, where's your mind go when you see some of those names in the 4th round if the Buffalo Bills hadn't pulled the trigger on a receiver yet?
Well, I mean, I might as well talk about my mock draft I put out today, where in the 4th round, I picked Velus Jones Jr. And the age, we talked about this in previous shows, does not scare me away from taking a guy like Velus Jones, especially when you're still going to have potentially 6, 7 years out of him if you get him a second contract. And again, we're talking about a 4th round guy. If you get 6, 7 years out of a 4th round guy on your roster, or even if you only get 4 really decent years out of a guy that's a 4th rounder, to me, that's a win. We're talking about a guy who has over 120 career kick returns in college. Okay. Just really started doing punt returns last year. But man, you want to talk about a guy who can come in and really threaten to be your day 1 kick and punt returner, Velus Jones,
and player of the year,
and be an heir apparent to, we'll call it Jamison Crowder after 1 year. This is a guy that doesn't need a lot of development, if you will. He's played at 2 different programs. He's comfortable in the slot. He can come in and be your kick and punt returner. And ultimately, I feel like the value for getting a guy like that in the 4th round is really strong. And so I really like Velus Jones Jr. And if really one of the main reasons that he's moving, or he's slotted where he is because of age, then that doesn't bother me. Now, I know Kendall probably talk a little bit more about some of the limitations he has, but speed to kill. I think he had the 2nd fastest 40 time of any of the receivers at the combine. And I kind of think, like, if you look back two years ago when Van Jefferson was drafted later than maybe he should have been because of his age, and he's come on and really stepped in nicely for the Rams before Odell got there, when Robert Woods went down, even last year. Van Jefferson's been nice for them, operating out of the slot, operating outside. He can do both. Velus Jones to me is the guy right here, and I would take him. So he would be my favorite guy on this list. And I still like Kyle Phillips a lot. I know he's going to be a pure slot guy. I know he didn't have the best numbers at the combine, but athletically kind of compares to Cole Beasley, right? Great route runner. He's going to operate out of the slot. He can be a kick and punt returner for you. So again, if you want to take a chance and take a swing at maybe a long-term slot option and you don't want to do it early, Kyle Phillips maybe is the guy. But for me, still Vilas, he'd be my number one option here in this group of guys. I'm just really high on his potential, and I really like that he's got the ability to return kicks and punts. To me, that's really important right now for this team.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like Vilas Jones, he just makes so much damn sense, right? Like, I know that like Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane seem morally opposed to letting a receiver who contributes on offense also contribute as a kick and punt returner, but you don't need to make Vilas Jones one of your top 3 receivers ever, right? Vilas Jones can be wide receiver 4
or 5 with McKenzie and Crowder.
Yeah. Yep. I'm projecting more into the future, like as guys like Crowder age out, but a guy like Vilas Jones can just be a guy who is your wide receiver 4. Like he only plays in case of injuries, or
he's going to be my heartbreak guy this year. He will be my heartbreak guy this year when someone else takes him.
Like I said, SEC teams, SEC player of the year, he could be your kick and punt returner. Now he's only got like 2 career punt returns. He's another projection guy as a punt returner, but I mean, just make that his thing, and you shouldn't really have.
He had 18. He had 18 punt returns in 2021.
What am I looking at? Okay,
he has 18 career punt returns for 15.1
average. Oh, I apologize. I was looking at his number of touchdowns.
122 career kick returns.
15-yard average on a punt return. So I was literally for some reason this website put touchdowns, then returns, then yards as the order. So I thought he had 1 for 18.
He only had 2 touchdowns, guys.
Unbelievable. But I mean, this is a guy. Yeah, like I said, like he just makes so much damn sense. And Kyle Phillips is another guy who just makes so much damn sense. I think Vilas has inside-outside flex as opposed to Kyle Phillips, who doesn't. So with Crowder in the fold, Kyle Phillips makes less sense. I'm willing to draft a guy who is a bona fide established punt returner. I'm willing to say if Kyle Phillips is on the board in round 4, we haven't taken a receiver yet. I'm willing to draft Kyle Phillips if Kyle Phillips doesn't take a single snap on offense this year. You redshirt him as a receiver. You make him your kick and punt returner, wide receiver number 6. And then when Jamison Crowder leaves in a year and collects his bag because he caught a ton of touchdowns from Josh Allen and he finally stayed healthy, then Kyle Phillips slots into that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 role for the Buffalo Bills. So these two, like I'm going to go through one of these days. I'm going to highlight the guys that I think are the best fits for the Buffalo Bills. And these two are going to, you're not going to be, their names aren't going to be legible. The ink is going to be so blurry from how hard I highlight the 2 names, Vilas Jones and Kyle Phillips. I just absolutely love both of those guys. And someone mentioned in the comments earlier, too low on David Bell. Again, I would pull the trigger sooner on David Bell. People say I put too much stock in the combine. I do think his combine will drop him. I don't think it'll drop him substantially, but I think it'll drop him from 2 to 3 to round 4. But I think you'd be getting an absolute steal into David Bell in round 4. He would sort of be a perfect, I think, type of just wide receiver if you're not asking to do like an every down type receiver. I mean, this is a guy who just catches fucking everything. You throw a ball his way, David Bell catches it. Like, it doesn't matter how overthrown or underthrown it is. Talk a little bit about David Bell, Kendall.
Yeah, I definitely think in terms of this projection, I think you're too low on him. I think he'll probably go in round 3. I think before the combine, he was looked at as like round 2 type of guy. And I think the combine definitely drops him into round 3. But I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if he makes it out of day 2. I would. But yeah, he's super strong hands. Like you said, he just catches everything in his radius. But on top of that, he's just a really tough player, like good blocker, good toughness with the ball in his hands. Not a natural separator because of the speed component, like the speed and agility component, but he has good, solid understanding of how to set up DBs and leverage his routes and stuff like that to find space in zone and help out his quarterback come back to the football, all that kind of stuff, where he can make it easier on himself to separate. But he's someone that's going to have to work harder to separate than other more athletic people in this draft. So I think that's definitely the cause for concern. And that's definitely why you'll see him drop into round 3 as per our projection type of thing. But he's still a really well-rounded player, and you can't ignore that. he's kind of the guy this whole time that I've been looking at as like the Gabe Davis type of story where Brandon Beane's like watching that combine, like, boy, I hope he runs it slow so we can nab him at a value.
I mean,
so
there was one point where David Bell was being talked about as a potential first or second
pick.
rounder,
Probably,
right?
yeah.
I mean, so man.
So have you guys had a chance to look into Isaiah Weston at all? My other guy that I got a fourth round grade on?
I
I
haven't.
have not.
I thoroughly encourage you to take a look at Isaiah Weston from Northern Iowa, 6'3", 215 pounds, ran a 4.42 40 at the combine. I think NFL GMs are going to look at him and see like a thicker, maybe dime store version of a DJ Chark, a guy who early on in his career can play the boundary and make plays down the football field with his size and his speed. So he can be a guy to go out there, run go routes and make plays down the field. And as his career progresses, you can sort of teach him how to do the other things. So I think a guy like Isaiah Weston, I don't know if the Buffalo Bills are going to have an interest in a guy like Isaiah Weston, but I know a ton of teams will see the size, speed, all that stuff. And I think Isaiah Weston will get drafted earlier than people think. He's a guy who's going to come off the board early day 3 and people are going to be like, what? Who? What? No, if you watch the Air Raid Hour, you know who Isaiah Weston is now. You are welcome. All right, on to round 5 now, where I got some names that you're all going to yell at me about because you think I have them on the board too late. One of them being Romeo Doubs. But my 5th round receivers, Tyquan Thornton, Bo Melton, Danny Gray of SMU, Romeo Doubs of Nevada, Eric Izuganma of Texas Tech, and a guy who I think is not a great Raz, really bad pro day, some really concerning injury histories, but this was one of the hottest names in college football his freshman year and one of the highest recruits coming out of college football a couple of years ago in Justin Ross. I think that a team will take a chance on him, but he could easily go undrafted based on his medicals as well. So I sort of split the difference there and I made him a 5th round pick.
That's fair.
I'm going to take my guy and I'm just going to go and I'm going to talk about him for about a minute. And you guys are just going to have to show up and listen. And then, you guys can have the floor. Tyquan Thornton, it will be one of the steals of this draft. This is a guy who everyone's going to be sort of obsessed with the fact that he came into the combine. He ran that 4.21, which was then docked down to a 4.28. I understand all of this. Tyquan Thornton is more than speed. At 6'2", 180 pounds, this guy's a former track star. He's still developing as a wide receiver. His catch radius, his catch point stuff, it is great. This guy, Tyquan Thornton, is Robbie Anderson with a fucking nos up his ass. Like, that is who Tyquan Thornton is. He is Robbie Anderson with another gear. That is the type of wide receiver that you are getting in Tyquan Thornton. People are going to say, well, he was overdrafted for his speed. No, he's going to end up being underdrafted. In my opinion, I'm a huge fan of Tyquan Thornton, but as Randy Harbin says, that will be out of the league in 2 years. So yes, Tyquan Thornton can catch. This is a catch point dude. He had a great East-West shrine. When he was targeted at Baylor, he always made the most of his targets, and he's got that speed. He's got that track style ability. I'm a huge fan of Tyquan Thornton. If he's the only receiver we take and we take him in the 5th round, I'm okay with that. But I love some of these other guys in this round. I love Bo Melton. I love Danny Gray. People tell me I love too many prospects, but Dave, talk about some of the guys that you like in this 5th round here, because this is another one of the money rounds.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's no secret. I've been on Romeo Doubs since before the Senior Bowl, and I was happy to see him have a nice Senior Bowl. Contributed. I think he had 2 catches, but he reminds me physically. I'm not saying he stylistically, but physically, he reminds me of AJ Brown. When you watch him play, like his thickness, his ability to get upfield quickly. I don't think he necessarily has the polish that an AJ Brown did coming out, but he is a good, decent route runner. Can separate. He's got some speed. He's got the nice size speed combination. The one thing that you're like, well, why isn't he getting like more love to be drafted higher? Well, he's not like super consistent catching the ball with his hands. Like when the games I watched, he does kind of tend to body catch sometimes. He's got big hands. He's got strong hands, but I think sometimes he doesn't use them to the extent that he should be. So you wonder about his ability to, the confidence, I think, is the thing with him. But he did improve last year from the year before. And obviously he had over 1,000 yards, had over double-digit touchdowns for Nevada playing with Carson Strong. So I think that the reason he's down kind of in this range is because of that. When people probably turn on the games and watch him, they're like, well, he isn't necessarily like super, super flashy in any one category. He's got decent speed. He's got great size, but he's like, you wonder about his confidence a little bit, and you wonder about his ability to be a true hands catcher, I think, at the next level. But man, physically, the dude is gifted. And in the 5th round, you're not going to find many guys who are more physically gifted than Dubs. And so that's why he's intriguing to me. I don't know about his fit for the Bills necessarily. I don't necessarily think he's a great fit for them, because to me, he's like bringing you some of the similar things that Gabe Davis does, and maybe not even to the extent that Gabe Davis can. But
if you're looking for a guy who can, we still haven't replaced the Emmanuel Sanders in this offense, right? Like,
that's true.
If Stephon Diggs or Gabriel Davis goes down, who is your option on the boundary? And
that could be
Isaiah Hodgins. It's a very skinny Marquez Stevenson. So I do think the Buffalo Bills need to definitely need to invest in a guy who at least has some flex to his game. That's why like Velus Jones greater than Kyle Phillips, things of that nature. As we start to talk about some guys, Bills Mafia STF, we apparently have a porn bot problem in the chat tonight. Judge is so horny for so many wide receivers. Porn bots can smell it.
I noticed that and I was like, what did we do to get this?
I don't know what we tagged.
Comments.
For those people listening on the podcast tomorrow, there are just porn bots taking over the comment section of the show with links to their webcams. Don't click on the links, folks.
Yeah, don't do that.
I like Dubs. So that's all I'm gonna say about it. He was one of my guys that I honed in on this going into the Senior Bowl when we did our Senior Bowl preview, and he didn't disappoint me there. And I think I really like him. I think he's got all the physical tools to be a really decent player in the NFL.
Kendall, I know Bo Melton is a guy that you've done a lot of work on. I say he's a bulkier Isaiah McKenzie. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I can't.
Okay. You see, I counted on Isaiah McKenzie, and you told me I was wrong a couple.
Well,
of weeks ago,
I mean, it's selling him short in a way, but like when you set it up saying he's a bulkier, like body type wise, and then like play style wise, there's a lot of similarities. Mm-hmm. And then the way he ran at his combine, like he's got the speed, he's got the quickness, but there's a little bit more polish to the route running side of things. But I think the most appealing part to Bo Melton is the fact that he's going to be operating out of the slot. He has return experience, and he's someone that can do a lot of that gadget type of stuff moving forward. He's someone that has played running back. He's someone that's played wide receiver for Rutgers, and he's literally Rutgers like playmaker. When you turn on Rutgers, it's him and it's Isaiah Pacheco. Like those are the two dudes making plays for that offense. So you got to stop and look and watch them. And he had a pretty solid Senior Bowl. Wasn't anything super crazy, like wasn't a standout or anything like that, but he showed some polish. He showed some ability to release off the line of scrimmage, use his hands to keep his body clean. Nothing like super crazy that you should write home about and be like, this dude is legit. This is the next, best slot receiver in the game. This is the next Deebo Samuel. Nothing like that. But yeah, Randy, he's right. You just shouldn't be watching Rutgers football in the first place.
You were forced to. You didn't have a choice.
I was forced to, but I was being paid to do it, so I guess I wasn't forced to. Anyways, yeah, no, he's a solid guy in the late rounds where he's going to check a lot of those boxes that we're looking for: playmaker, run after the catch, slot ability, return ability, Deebo Samuel ability, because you got to talk about that Deebo Samuel ability. So I think that's something to talk about when you're talking about Bo Melton. He's someone we should keep our eyes on. I think 5th round is a really good spot for him to expect to go. And I think that's a good spot for the Bills to go ahead and take him if they haven't already taken one, or if they want to double dip. I think it's a good guy. He checks a lot of boxes in that way. But I actually want to talk about Justin Ross, because I think you're spot on in like saying he's probably a 5th round guy because of all of this stuff, man.
He could easily go undrafted
stuff. Yeah.
Marvin Wilson
crazy.
didn't get drafted last year, right? Like
exactly. Marvin Wilson was a good prospect aside from the medical red flags. It's crazy. But Justin Ross, when you watch the tape, it's undeniable, man. The dude just knows how
Devontae
to play
Parker
the wide receiver.
flashes the Devontae Parker.
He knows how to play the wide receiver position. He can go up. He can high point the football. Super strong, reliable hands. He's lowered his drop percentage year after year after year. He's been in school. He's just a really reliable receiver, knows what he's doing out there. And while there was obviously a drop off once Trevor Lawrence left Clemson, he was still doing the best he could with the quarterback play there. And you could see it was a drop off, but he was still producing as much as he could with all the medical stuff. So it's a player I really like, a player minus all the medical stuff. Like, I'd have him as a third round. Like, no way he sneaks out of the third round.
And
but yeah, he could be a real big value for a team that takes a chance on those medicals.
His pro day, which was today the 23rd? No, today's the 24th. His pro day yesterday did him no favors. I mean, he ran a 4.64 40. He had a 2.72 split, 20-yard split. He had a 1.76 10-yard split.
Yeah,
he only had a 31-inch vertical. He had a 908 broad. He didn't do any of the agility drills.
He's more athletic on tape, but
100%.
But yeah, no, this isn't great.
I think this is one of the ones where the RAS doesn't do the player justice. But when you combine that and you combine the injuries, if Justin Ross is a UDFA, don't be shocked.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a player I love. Like I said, flashes of Devontae Parker when you watch his game, and he was just such a highly sought after recruit, and he had that huge national championship game when he was. What him and Trevor Lawrence did at 18 years old is just astounding to me to this day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What 18-year-old Trevor Lawrence and what 18-year-old Justin Ross did to Alabama on the biggest stage in the world at 18 years old is absolutely astounding to me. And always will be the performance that those guys put up in that national championship game. But I believe that one was in Santa Clara. But last guy here in the 5th round, Danny Gray. I've been on the Danny Gray train for a while. Just under 6 foot, 186 pounds. He's a speed slot, 4.33. Kind of gives me some Quez Watkins vibes. He can do some return stuff as well. So a guy like Danny Gray, if the Buffalo Bills have an interest, I have an interest in a guy like Danny Gray as well. That leads us now to the 6th round. And I'm just going to preface this by saying these last guys that I list here are the guys that I feel the most comfortable will get drafted. Then I combine 7th round in UDFA because I feel like it's almost pick your poison with the rest of the guys. These are the guys who I feel like athletically, tape-wise, etc. This rounds out my list of guys I feel confident will hear their name called in the draft. So these guys could be 6th rounders. They could be 5th rounders. Kevin Austin could test his way all the way up into day 2. Would be a mistake, but he could. And then some of these guys could go 7th. I just feel like these round out the guys who get drafted. Then we'll get to sort of the a la carte 7th round UDFA type of guys later. Someone's going to say, where's Reggie Roberson? I think injuries slide him into the question mark category, and he doesn't have sort of the bona fide history that a guy like Justin Ross has to overcome the injuries to make me feel comfortable slotting him somewhere. So when it comes to 6th round wide receivers, I got Tanner Connor from Idaho State. He is another one of those balls of clay that I think people are going to fall in love with. 6'3", 220 pounds or so. Jalen Naylor, another really athletic guy. Kevin Austin, Jr. of Notre Dame, tested off the charts. Charleston Rambo had a really good East-West shrine. Former Georgia Bulldog, resurrected his career at Miami. Samori Toure, who was the biggest combine snub I have ever seen. He will get drafted with his speed. Braylon Sanders from Ole Miss and Ty Freifogel from Indiana. Dave, any names really stick out to you there in that 6th round range?
I mean, Austin is the guy that I think seems to be picking up steam recently. I think people are falling in love with those testing numbers. And obviously, we talked about it with Olave and other guys who are like bona fides, but the ability to track the ball vertically, he's got that, right? And he's got the size. I mean, by chance here says Austin's a favorite of mine. Silas Whittle says Jalen Naylor's tough. He can fly. I like Naylor as well in this range. Austin, to me, would be like a consolation prize if you missed out on dubs, let's say in the round before, and you wanted to go for someone with maybe some similar traits. Okay, maybe you go for a guy like Kevin Austin. But to be perfectly honest with you, like I'm lumping like all the 6th, 7th, and UDFAs together because that's just like, to me, it is a freaking crapshoot once you get outside of those last few names we mentioned in the 5th round. with knowing the averages is only 33. There's going to be, like we said with running backs, another like 15, 20 guys that could either be on this list you've got in the 6th round or it could be undrafted guys, right? And so the two guys I think that kind of maybe stand out to me a little bit in this group are Naylor and Austin, but I'm not in love with any of these guys. I don't like, if I'm the Bills and I don't take a receiver by the 5th round, I'm just going to wait and sign a UDFA if I want another receiver. I'm not going to draft one.
That's fair.
Yeah, because I like the UDFA list, I think, more than I like this list. But Samori Toure, he sticks out like a sore thumb to me. I mean, he's one of my favorite prospects in this class. 6'3", 190 pounds. He had his pro day today, ran like a 4.44. Played at Montana State, went to Nebraska, put up some solid numbers at Nebraska. Had a really good East-West Shrine game. Again, I'm still one of the reasons why you think maybe he doesn't get drafted is because he didn't get invited to the combine. But we've seen guys who didn't get invited to the combine get drafted before. I just don't understand. Samori Toure would be one of the guys I would take a chance on later on.
I like Toure. I mean, he's got versatility. He's got the competitive edge that you look for, right? He's got good ball skills. I think the reason that, like you mentioned, no combine and like he doesn't have the most explosive sort of physical twitchiness traits like that that you would like to see if you're talking about when you get into this level, this area of the draft. You're either looking, like Steve, you and I used to say, you're either looking for ceiling guy or you're looking for a guy with like specific traits. So what are the traits he has? Well, he's got ball skills and competitive toughness and some versatility. Is that enough to kind of separate him from this other group of guys? Maybe. I like Toure too. I probably should have mentioned him, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Naylor and Austin, I think, are the two names that really like sort of stick out like a sore thumb in this group because they tested so well. But I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. Both of these guys are, look like Tarzan, play like Jane to me. Like they're guys whose tape just doesn't line up to their athletic attributes. So now I think NFL GMs will look at them and be like, well, I can turn this guy into something. I can get them into my program. I can get them around experienced NFL people and I can turn them into something. And Jalen Naylor even gives you return flex as well. But I mean, Kendall, we were having this conversation at the show yesterday. They both remind us, both guys are sort of like Darius Slayton types because they look like a wide receiver, but and Darius Slayton has had some relative success in the National Football League, but ask any Giants fan, they get fucking pissed at a guy like Darius Slayton because he usually does at least one stupid thing every game. And drops are an issue for a guy like him. So I think both of those guys' athletic traits are going to get them drafted, maybe even overdrafted. You could see 4th, 5th round. I think it'd be a huge mistake. I'd be willing to take a risk in the 6th round with both of those guys.
Same.
Because of the athletic traits, but I just don't know if I'd be willing to go any higher than that. Any guys here on this list like Naylor or Austin or any of them stick out to you?
I mean, I haven't done enough work on Charleston Rambo, but his background with Oklahoma sticks out, and I need to watch his tape. I have 2 games on
Joe
him
Marino, stamp of approval. He's a big fan, and I know he's
that's another reason
for TDN.
Exactly. So I got to check out Charleston Rambo, but no, Naylor and Austin are the only 2. I've watched a game of Danny Gray, but those are the only 2, Austin and Naylor, that I've done any work on. And my big reservation with Naylor is I think a lot of people are really big on him this draft season, but my big reservation with him is the lack of route running polish, because a lot of what he's doing is gimmicky type stuff, that jet sweep, handoff, quick screens, manufactured touches. And then if it's not that, it's just vertical stuff. It's, hey, go run straight, go run fast because you're a former track star, or run a deep post. Like there's not much nuance there. But with that being said, obviously, if you're taking someone like that in the 6th round, you can bet on those traits and that you would coach those kind of things up and you can get that refinement in the route running later on. That's more of a concern that you should have with guys that you're drafting on day 1, day 2. A day 3 guy, you're not exactly expecting a nuanced route tree from them, but that's probably my biggest concern from Jalen Naylor. It's just his route tree is limited. He wasn't asked to do a lot, and I wonder how steep the learning curve will be at the next level. I actually think Kevin Austin's probably more pro ready than Jalen Naylor, but Yeah, he doesn't play as athletic as he tested. He plays athletic, but not as athletic as he tested.
All right. Looking at some of these names and the 7th round / UDFA list, sort of the fringe prospects, there's a lot of names to like here. Dontario Drummond, Trey Turner from Virginia Tech, who some people might get on my ass and say this guy's a draftable prospect. I just don't see in Trey Turner what other people see in Trey Turner. Jaquez Ezzard, who had a really good NFL PA Bowl. He got invited late to the Senior Bowl, sort of an Isaiah McKenzie type of Sam Houston State, of a gadget guy, return guy, slot guy. Slade Bolden would be sort of maybe like a who was the player I was trying to compare Slade Bolden to? Tim Taylor from Cincinnati, or Trent Taylor from Cincinnati. Yeah, severely overdrafted by the 49ers. Our guy, Devin Tompkins, who had 5'5", 153 pounds. That's what he weighed in at his pro day. Reggie Roberson Jr., who I am a huge fan of, but he's got that injury history. Dejon Dixon from Nicholls State, who had a combine invite. Mike Woods from Oklahoma. Britton Covey from Utah. One of our favorites here, Jareth Stearns, a slot receiver from Western Kentucky. Stanley Berryhill, who TDN is very high on, from the University of Arizona, another smaller gadget guy. Buffalo went to Samford's pro day. Samford has Montreal Washington, a guy who ran for a touchdown, caught a touchdown, and returned a kick for a touchdown against Florida when Samford played them. Montreal Washington is sort of a gadgety type of receiver with a lot of skills there. Derek Young from Lenoir Ren, Kyle Duggar's alma mater, is another. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list, a guy that a lot of people felt should have gotten a combine invite based on his intangibles. You got Javon Hale from Coastal Carolina, Josh Johnson from Tulsa. These are all now we're getting to the list of some combine guys. Malachi Polk from Mississippi State, Johnny Johnson from Oregon, Devon Williams from Oregon, Amika Emezi, NC State guy who had a really good East-West Shrine game, Tay Martin from Oklahoma State, Jaquiri Robertson from Wake Forest, Tyzeer Mack from Pitt, Khalil Pimpleton, horrible name, good returner in the MAC for CMU, Michael Young Jr., the other receiver at Cincinnati, who was a Notre Dame transfer, Jalen Vigil, who is an absolute athletic freak, another guy on Bruce Feldman's freak list from Appalachian State, Demetrius Roberson, a slot guy. This is a huge theme here late. Small guys who are quick and can return. Demetrius Roberson, Mike Harley from Florida, and Treble Harris from Washington State all fit that same mold. I mean, guys, we're scraping bottom of the barrel here. I'm not saying there's not talent at the end of this draft, but it's certainly not the type of guys that you see before here. Dave, who are maybe some guys that you like late?
So I do like Trey Turner. I think that he is draftable. I get what you're saying, because you watch the games and you're like, what exactly does he do that's so great? Well, he is competitive. He does fight for the ball. He does do well at the catch point. He's not fast, obviously. He only ran in the 4.5s at the combine, but he is an inside-outside guy. He can play both, so that does give him a little bit of something to look at there. Roberson, obviously, we like those guys from SMU, and I like Roberson. I think outside, without the injury, we're talking about a potentially a different situation with him, right? So, and then obviously I have to talk about Emeka, right? I mean, here's a guy who has over 200 career receptions at NC State. It's a classic NC State situation, right? We're the redheaded stepchild of the three schools here between UNC, Duke, and NC State. NC State guy thinks he's the alpha. He's not. Emeka is the guy who thinks he's like the alpha receiver, and he plays like it, but he's just limited somewhat physically, right? He's not super fast. He's not like, he doesn't have like that twitchiness necessarily, but the dude goes up and catches the ball, right? Like, you put it up there, he's going to go up for it. So like mentally, I love where his game's at. So he could be a special teamer for you, right? He could be that Marcus Easley type for you that we had years ago, right? That was like the bigger bodied kind of special team receiver type, the Sam Aiken of the world. So I can't go off that list and not mention Emeka at least once. So
Dilly Dale comes in and says Bolden is the most versatile. I mean, there's a lot of. I was watching the combine, right? Like, and one of the things that stuck out to me was they always talked about how Mac Jones and Slade Bolden, when they were on the Alabama scout team, would give Alabama starting defense fits. And I do think that there's a place for a guy like Slade Bolden in the National Football League. I just don't know if it's with Buffalo. He would be worth a flyer late if you feel he can be your kick and punt returner. But now we get back into that Jamison Crowder, Isaiah McKenzie, Marquez Stevenson. Do you feel like you need more?
Too many cooks in the kick return kitchen, man.
Not even just that, like the size kitchen and the versatility to play on the outside kitchen. So, I mean, my guy, and again, my guy is Britton Covey from Utah. I know he's an older prospect because he did the Mormon mission. I mean, his first year at Utah was in 2015. Then he took 2 years off and played in 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. But we talk about projecting all these kick and punt returners. Britton Covey is from day one in the National Football League. You can get him as a 7th round pick or a UDFA because of his age. He is your day one, I think, upper echelon, top 10 in the National Football League kick and punt returner. This is a guy with 92 career punt returns at the University of Utah, 33 career kick returns. You saw him house one from 101 yards in the Rose Bowl. So he's done some things on some big stages. He can, maybe as Jamison Crowder ages out of this offense, Isaiah McKenzie's only on a 1-year deal. Over time, he could probably contribute in the passing game like a Gunnar Olszewski. To me, he's Gunnar Olszewski, who just left New England and went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would take that as my 7th wide receiver. Get rid of Tywan Jones, have Britton Covey or whatever, get rid of one of the linebackers, house a 7th receiver, make it Britton Covey. The dude never sees the field on offense. He just kicks and turns punts. He is a bona fide day one. You don't have to worry about him. You can put him back there and you have a legitimate kick and punt returner. I can't believe more teams out there, and maybe there aren't looking at this guy and saying, I just solved my kick and punt returner problem with the snap of a finger.
Which is why he may get drafted.
He could.
Right? I mean,
he could. But I think his age will knock him out. I think he's gonna be 26 or something like that. But it's a no-brainer to me to take a guy like Britton Covey. No-brainer to me. Kendall, any guys that you like at the end there? Hey, best cams, they're with me. They're with me. They believe in Britton Covey. I can't get rid of it now. There we go.
I know.
What is happening?
I don't know, man. It's tough. All right, so I have 3 that I can talk about from that list. At least I think it's only 3. First one is Stanley Berryhill. I just scouted him today. I was actually pleasantly surprised with what I saw from him. He's someone I'd take a stab at in the late rounds. Like if the Bills really wanted to double dip and find someone in that regard, I think he's someone that has enough polish in his game where you can justify it. He's someone who's taken snaps at running back and he's taken snaps at slot and he's taken snaps out wide. So he's versatile enough. Not super versatile to play outside, but he'll be most comfortable in the slot. He has some punt return history, had 18 punts returned this past year for 8.7 average, which is pretty good. And then he's just got really good hands. Like I was shocked at how well he catches the ball with his hands. Like he is a pluck catcher. If he has to, he'll use his body, but he can pluck the ball out of there. So I was really surprised with his game. Some limitations in terms of route running. He's a little stiff as a route runner, and that shows in his agility scores at his pro day. So that is something that he will have to work on, but he understands how to find spacing against zone, and he has the speed to separate against man. It's just going to become, how are you going to work with your athletic limitations in terms of your agility? But he has elusiveness once he gets the ball in his hands. So he's a tough tackle for sure. Jareth Stearns is the other one. I know you guys like him. I wrote a full scouting report on him for SIS. Big thing with him is like all the manufactured touches. Like he has, I'm pretty sure like he's leading every single leaderboard for catches, yards, touchdowns, everything in Division I football for this past season. So he was a stat sheet stuffer, but a lot of it was because of that manufactured touch type stuff. So he is a gadget guy. He's someone that's going to be limited to the slot. He's short, but he's kind of thick. So he's a tough tackle as well. Really sure-handed. I'm pretty sure he has like the lowest drop percentage amongst all draftable receivers this year. So really sure-handed in that regard, but there are limitations in terms of his route tree. Are you really going to trust him to run a full route tree from the slot? So there are some concerns in that regard, which is probably going to drop him. And then obviously the competition that will drop him. And then I know Dean knows that Tulsa has been a big scouting target, and Josh Johnson is another guy I have a full scouting report on. He's an interesting guy. He's someone who works primarily out of the slot. He's very sudden in his route running, which is probably the thing I like the most about him. He understands how to find space against zone, really good understanding finding space against zone, which is great for a Bills quarterback that goes up against zone so often. So that's really, really impressive from him. But the limitation with him is athletically, can he separate against man just using that suddenness? Because he still needs to work on attacking the leverage of DBs and then throttling down and being efficient with his footwork at the top of his routes, because he's super sudden when he sets people up. Mm-hmm. But is he going to be able to stay that sudden through the entirety of his routes? And that lack of athleticism, is that going to hinder him against man at the next level? That's my biggest question with him. But that suddenness is really impressive, and it's something that should help him in his release package, but he wasn't tested because he plays in the slot. When you play in the slot, you don't get pressed all that often, but it translates to someone that should be able to release somewhat fairly, but it's a projection.
All right, I'm just going to go look through this thing one more time because I want to just make sure there's no one I miss. Jared Stearns kind of gives me Willie Snead vibes. I know they're not the same player, but just sort of the role. Devin Tompkins, we just need to go back and have a conversation about Devin Tompkins. I mean, 5'5", 173 pounds. You want to talk about this year's Jalen Darden. That's Devin Tompkins. And you mentioned, Kendall, like when Joe Shane was there to scout Trey McBride, he had his eyes on Devin Tompkins too.
He had a game. So, Devin Tompkins had a game. You couldn't keep your eyes
He
off
was
of
like the third leading receiver in college football this year.
Yeah.
At 5'5", 173 pounds, he can dunk a basketball and put his elbow through the rim. At 5'5", 153 pounds.
He plays much bigger than his size.
He plays so much bigger than his size. He is this year's Jalen Darden. I'm just, when projecting where he gets drafted, I want to say like he's going to get Jalen Darden and go in the middle rounds of the draft. But 153 pounds, man, is just. And then he didn't get a single East-West Shrine, Senior Bowl, NFL, none of those. Despite the fact that he was like the second or third leading receiver. I mean, he could have turned him down. We don't know these things. Didn't get a combine invite. Like it's him and Britton Covey didn't get any invites to anything. It was pretty crazy, but Devin Tompkins is, I made a post on Twitter today. Every couple of weeks, I just need to remind people that he exists because he is just when Joe Shane was out there scouting him, there was questions about whether the Buffalo Bills could afford to retain Isaiah McKenzie.
Right.
The Buffalo Bills have now retained Isaiah McKenzie. So again,
it could shift a little bit.
All these things could shift, whether it's Ezard, whether it's Covey, whether it's Berryhill. Literally 9/10 of the name on there are like tiny gadget slot guys. Yeah. Devin Tompkins. None of those guys could be on the Bills' radar because, like, again, when you make a wide receiver room, there's only so many places you can fit those type of guys. You can't fit all of them onto your roster. But I mean, Devin Tompkins, 102 catches last year, 1,700 yards. He averaged 16.7 yards per catch, 10 touchdowns. I mean, the guy was just absolutely incredible. He's got 16 career kick returns. He's got 7 career punt returns. We got to talk about him. I'm not going to end this show without going at least on a little bit of a rant about Devin Tompkins, future XFL superstar Devin Tompkins. All right, ladies and gentlemen, 2 hours, 15 minutes, but I think that was a very thorough conversation on every draft eligible receiver and then some. So ladies and gentlemen, we super appreciate it. The next show, we're going to be breaking down offensive tackles and tight ends. We're going to be talking corners. We still got linebacker, safeties to go, interior offensive line as well. Before we head out, gentlemen, who is your early front runner for no matter what? Who is your early wide receiver no matter what?
It's
I'm-
obvious. It's obvious for me. You guys already know who it is.
Silas comes in and says, can we forget about our practice squad guys? Too many people think these guys need a shot. The coaches see these guys all the time and they still sign McKenzie and Crowder. I mean, if you look at our depth chart, man, I mean, wide receiver 5 is wide open. Wide receiver 6 is wide open. Kumaro versus Hodgins, Stevenson can still work his way in there. I think Tanner Gentry legitimately has a shot to make this football team. Obviously, we can make some additions over the course of the next month, but these guys they're going to come in and compete. I think the only 4 guaranteed spots right now are McKenzie, Crowder, Davis, and Diggs. So 5 and 6 is open, maybe even 7. But yeah, you guys, I'll go first. As much as I want to say Khalil Shakir here, I'm going to go Tyquan Thornton as mine no matter what. Early front runner, Khalil Shakir and Tyquan Thornton. Those are the 2 I'm going back and forth on.
Mm-hmm.
People in the comment section, let us know who your maybe early front runner is for no matter what, the receiver that you really need the Buffalo Bills to draft.
Is this a sloth?
That's a T-Rex.
It's a T-Rex.
And I would say we typically try to not go with the first round guys on these no matter what.
Yeah.
So my no matter obviously there are a lot of options super early in the draft, but my no matter what is Velus Jones. I think it's pretty clear. Had him in my mock today. Love the ability to return kicks and punts. Love his ability to play inside and out. Could be a slot, and you love the speed that you saw at the combine. So to me, for right now, it's Velus.
Kendall, how about you?
Oh, this is so tough, man. This is really tough.
It's not a final answer.
I know, but it's still tough because I'm viewing it as my final answer. I think I'm gonna go with Kyle Phillips. I just love his ability to uncover, his ability to separate with just nuanced route running and an understanding of just how to get open. It is so natural for him. He's surprisingly tough with the ball in his hands, has that punt return flex. Who knows if we can get him to kick return flex. Didn't run a great 40, but he ran a great 10-yard split. So, he's got that quickness to his game, and you can see it in his route running ability. I really like Kyle Phillips's game. If he sneaks into the 4th round, oh my God, no matter what.
And he is an experienced kick and punt returner at UCLA. So he adds that wrinkle as well. Randy says here late, he's going with Sky Moore. Adding Moore and Hall would make the offense so much more explosive. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are 2 hours and 20 minutes into this thing, and there are still 192 of you in here. This is why Von Miller came to Buffalo, right?
Seriously,
this is why Von Miller came to Buffalo. You people are absolute freaks, and I love you. I'm going to go back through after this show. I'm going to timestamp this. So if you are listening on demand, hopefully you're utilizing that timestamp feature to fast forward or rewind wherever you want to go. If there's anything you want to go back and rewatch, it'll be timestamped as well. If you are listening on demand, leave a comment. We will make sure over the course of the week to get into the comment section and make sure we respond to you. Make sure you smash that like on your way out, or if you're listening on demand, smash that like after the fact. And if you are listening on podcast form, because our faces are just too beautiful for you to be looking at for 2 hours and 20 minutes, give us that subscribe, give us a review, give us some stars, whether it's Google Podcasts or Spotify or iTunes, whatever it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?